Hi everyone. We will be starting with our next session shortly. I kindly request our speaker to kindly proceed to the dais. Also, this is for your general information that the Shillong Literary Festival and the dialogues, the engaging dialogues here on the stage are also being telecasted live on YouTube via the DD Meghalaya official channel, as well as through the state's official OTT platform, Hello Meghalaya. Thank you. For our next session on the crafting of visual narrative, a dialogue with the illustrator, we welcome Mr. Mario Pathaw in conversation with Mr. Kenneth Hankyo. For this session, we will be discussing on the intersection of indigenous storytelling and modern visual design, with the illustrator's work spanning from graphic novels inspired by the Living Root Bridges to public murals across Shillong city that reflect the cultural identity of the region and most recently the state emblem of Meghalaya. For this session on the crafting of visual narrative, we will be in conversation with Mario Pathaw, a PhD scholar at the Department of Design at IIT Guwahati, specializing in communication design, architecture, illustration, and comics, primarily focusing on indigenous art and design of the Khasi and Jantia community, with his notable projects including the Meghalaya State Emblem, as mentioned, and initiatives for the Meghalaya Farmers Empowerment Commission. And in conversation and moderating this discussion, we are joined by an educator and an illustrator, best known for his work Bar Comics, whose passion for art and storytelling blends wit and cultural resonance in his caricatures. For this session, we are joined by Mr. Kenneth Hankyo. Sir, the floor is yours for the next half an hour.
Thank you so much. So much of half of my work, I think, is done with the introduction. And yes, Mario Pathaw, very good evening to you. And I'm really happy to be having this opportunity to finally have a talk with you. And frankly, we've been friends on social media for quite a while, and this is the first time that we've actually met in person and having a conversation with you. So, Mario, I just want to start off right away with if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and this journey so far and how this all came about, your inspirations, right from when you were, when you first started off drawing on blank papers and textbooks.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm currently doing my PhD in the field of design, specifically in the communication design from IIT Guwahati. I completed my master's from IIT Bombay. And so starting about this venture for art and illustration, it has always been, ever since I was a little kid. So in terms of visual narratives, when I was, in school as a boy, all of my, when I study, I love to sketch whatever I study so that I will remember better. So especially with literature or science, it carried on to, to my college days also. So being, in the field of architecture also, we rely heavily on visuals to explain our concept, explain what we want to get our message across. So that's how it started. And also, since my parents also were staunch Catholics and so we didn't have much of these great galleries, art galleries in Shillong. The only outlet for me to experience the artworks were the cathedral. That most of the artworks in 1947, the stained glass were from France, and then the other art reliefs and the sequential arts were from Berlin. So all of these paved ways in some kind to my style today and how I fell in love with visual narratives.
So which means you have a very, photographic memory, I might say, when it comes to
For interesting things.
memorizing and, visualizing things. When it comes to concepts and all, what you have to. All right. So moving on. All right. I think I would dare say no work by, I think, from any artist from our state who has permeated into the nook and crannies of every Shillong household, I would dare say, when it comes to your artwork, which is very accessible and in the sense that, in the form of, your work with association with the government, with the calendars, the murals, and, your accessories and the prints that you have made out. I think a lot of people are familiar just by looking at your paintings, and I think they could easily tell that this is a Mario Pathaw painting. So you have made it your signature look. But yes, looking at your paintings, I've seen that they're very, very close to the style of Nouveau art style. I think this is because of your architectural background, I think. There's a lot of symmetry and a lot of the colors, the color combinations as well. So how did this come about with your, your association with Art Nouveau? And are you going to go ahead with your future, with your future paintings and artworks? Are you headed down this path, or are you going to evolve in some way or change a little bit?
So it started off, falling in love with architecture, the Renaissance. When I was in 6th grade, I was 12 years old, and we had this history book. And we were bombarded with all of these works by Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. And I could see that just by using geometrical shapes, they could actually make sense of these compositions. And that's when I told my mom and dad first I told them that I want to be a fine artist. Then my parents were like, find something else. So I found this perfect amalgamation of technology, engineering, and art was architecture. And later on, studying about art history, I came across Alphonse Mucha. And I think, personally for me, he was one of the pioneers for graphic design also, or commercial art, because he was the first one who did for Sarah Bernhardt, the posters. Because prior to him were more of, works that you would see in an exhibition, but then his work carried on as posters. And then later on, as I go about and studying his work, I could see how he, with bold lines. And then there was some kind of parallels also with the Yukoi of Japan.
Yeah,
we could see in the works of, Hiroshige and, all of them who has contributed to that art era. And that has somehow made me as much as I can to amalgamate both styles into my art, because it resonates so much with the culture of art tribes here.
All right, that's very fascinating. And, with your, I think with your background as an architect and your eye for detail, you could actually witness like the detail that you've added to these stories. And we'll come to the graphic novel that you have I think that was during the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken. So how much of research has that, have you done with that, or is it?
For that, actually, it stemmed out as a master's degree project at IDC School of Design in IIT Bombay. We worked together with Professor Prasad Bokal on, so many of my colleagues and my classmates were taking up visual narratives that speak about, the current situation that we have, be it the political aspects or be it, health, etc. But for some reason, whenever I pick a project for my, academic project, I always pick a project that resonates with my identity. So so I've been to this Living Root Bridge for a very long time, ever since I was a kid at the age of 7. That was the first time I saw it. And I was very mesmerized and saw how the people managed to sustain it in such a way where they put all of these bamboo rafters and scaffoldings and guide the roots. But then most of the research, one thing about us researchers is that our works always end up in research papers in which the dissemination of knowledge is just between us, But when it comes to how, if I want to let this work of mine speak to the whole public, visuals is one of the ways. So it was a time when we were heavily inspired, with comics and manga and everything. So I was thinking to myself, maybe we can create a tale revolving around the practice of the Living Root Bridge, sustaining the Living Root Bridge, and add a little spice to that. We inculcated the concept of these nymphs, Kapuriblai. We inculcated the concept of Ukla. A lot of those things, like the bits and parcels of the pockets inside the tale, so that it'll make the viewers or the readers much, engaged in finding out the drama, just instead of just having an information brochure.
All right. So yes, I remember reading an article. I think it was based on your graphic novel Tandrai, and if I'm not mistaken, we had a very unique take on. If I'm not mistaken, this article that I read, I think it was from Riot webzine. So it's one of my favorite webzines that I used to read. But I've seen a very unique take of your, on the word modernism. And your idea about modernism is not about structural. I mean, it's a very, how I put it, contrasting for you coming from that architectural background. So.
The tale is a kind of a conversation between a grandfather and a granddaughter. So it starts off with a conversation where this grandfather is teaching the granddaughter how to preserve the Living Root Bridge, and the granddaughter was like, "Why can't we just have steel bridges like we have in the cities?" Yeah. So that's when I took this quote from Gandhi, and it's like, nature is for everyone's need, not every man's greed. So that's stemmed out, as the narrative that follows for the whole entire book.
There's a very refreshing take on, on modernism. Like for us, when we say, when we think about future cities, we think of flying cars and huge skyscrapers and whatnot. But it was really refreshing to read that. So, in your view, does the visual narrative deepen the experience of folk tales compared to reading or, hearing about these stories orally? What do you think?
I think, as an illustrator, yes, we sort of are somehow a guiding beacon for the viewers on how to. We're not actually trying to make the readers see a tale from our eyes, but in the sense where we sometimes, when you read, the cognitive load is quite large, especially for people who do not have the habit of reading.
Yes.
But then when it comes to visuals, when you think about it, especially when I teach, I ask, how many of you have seen the movie Harry Potter? Many, raise their hands. And how many of you have read the book? They were like, quite, a handful of them. And that's when we see the power of image making. Yeah. And also, when we think about, for example, like Neil Gaiman, he gave very good examples that these tangible, the physical book, that holding a physical book itself also with visuals makes a lot of sense. So in my book also, when you read it also, for example, telling a secret, the very act of you turning the page to discover the secret also adds a little bit of an interactive mode for the readers. So those are the small things that we sometimes overlook in a book, and that's how I have inculcated as an illustrator.
All right. regarding your other books, besides the graphic novel, you have also worked with some writers from Shillong, I think, based on the conservation of the Amur falcons, and
Yes,
then what was it about
Kongtong.
the Hong Kong and
Yes.
yes. So how did that come about? Was it a project that you initiated, or or was it?
Okay, this project was headed by Saramandala Foundation, and the project is known as the Forgotten Folklore Project. And they approached me, just right after COVID, so it was Lanu who approached me, and she was working on this, the concept of Kongtong. And Oswin, who is the writer, many of us, we always see Kongtong as the whistling village, but according to him, since he's done extensive research on Kongtong, he says that it's actually the tunes of Kongtong, not the whistles of Kongtong, because those are tunes, Kaching Roi Yao Bei. So in that aspect, when I worked with Oswin, so Lanu was asking me on how visually can you represent sound on paper. That's quite a challenging, if it's an animated film, it's quite easy. Or, if it's a movie, it's quite easy because there's, the relationship between sound and image. But over here, you have only text and image relationship. So over here, what we've done is that we've borrowed this concept of how musicians use the notes, and using the same concept in illustration, we have made it the tunes to come out of the mouth with a little bit of musical notes to make sure that the readers understand that these are not just words, but these are actually tunes. So those are one of the challenges, but that's how we got the project going.
All right. So I've read some of them. I think it's very. I think it's actually focused towards young kids. I think
Yes,
pushing them to
level 2 and level 3.
Yeah. So what about these books? Are they? Will they be recommended to schools or just?
I think it's headed by Saramandala Foundation and the Forgotten Folklore. It's initially for the Aganwadis. And yes, so they've been going on, all of the rural areas, especially, for example, the ones that we've done Kongtong. They went to Kongtong and actually showed the kids over there about, how we have, represented them in the picture books, or the Amur Falcons in Ribhoi, where we have these heroes, these 3 boys who wants to conserve, the Amur and protecting them, from, killing the birds with stones. So those are the things that we went to the village, and they see themselves, they recognize themselves in the illustrations.
I think even Bor, the bully, would have. There would be some bully in that village.
Yes, Bor is the bully, actually.
I think he would. There would be someone who would identify with that character,
yes,
and then in turn, while learning about it, so that's a. At the same time, it's like you're doing not just spreading education, at the same time with awareness. So when it comes to balance, how do you balance staying true to these traditional elements of folk tales, bringing your own creative interpretation of the visuals? So I think you must have tweaked a little bit when it comes to your paintings as well for Lee Dokha and different.
Yes,
I'm getting the question.
Yeah, I think in terms of folk tales, especially with all the illustrations that we've done, I think one of my favorite subject was the story of Klo Watkasngi, which is the story of the peacock and the sun. And I've been sketching this ever since I was in 8th grade. So I've been having multiple variations as I age. I'm not that old, but as I age. But so every time I get an idea, or I read more about this tale and I inculcate more about and in the initial stage you could see the sun as the sun itself. But as we go, one of the earlier the latest versions is that I have just made her the sun into a woman, because we personify the sun as Kamesi, the mother sun. So, and as we go along, also, I tend to meet a lot of people who have worked on many tales. For example, I've met Francis Kongwar also, and he's worked on Kirwa, and it relates to Pasanteo. Okay. And recently I found out that the flower that was used to lure her was Mario Pathaw, actually. Okay. It was like the flower of the pumpkin. And it's quite interesting because then I go back to my drawing board and remake a lot of these things, and with a different perspective, with a different view or a different take on it, trying as much as I can to be, very authentic about, the information that I represent.
All right. So I always thought that the flower was Liu Jaling Klen.
Yes, some of them they do, and there's a lot of text actually about that. And so what is very surprising for me is that, it's Mario Pathaw, which is, we take for granted that it's not really beautiful and everything, but over here we can see that she was lured by Mario Pathaw.
So coming back to, crafting visual narratives with comics through the form of comic genre, I was wondering, like, your process in, when it comes to storyboarding, because as comic artists, yes, we have to plan about, the camera angles. We are like the directors of photography. We're like, from the styling to the, the color choice. So, how does that come about with you? Does it come naturally, or do you plan, because as artists, we have to think of the speech bubble as well.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And where do you leave a space for, not to say anything? Like, the picture will just speak for itself.
So for me also, the story is very important. So we write it as, one, a report of the story, and then cherry pick a little bit of how we're going to simplify the text as much as possible. And we leave spaces so that the images will speak more than words. And there are so there's this idea of sequential art. So from one frame to another frame, there's, for example, there's one action here, and the next action can happen in the next frame. Me getting up and drinking the water. But what happens between these two frames plays in the minds of the people who actually do. So the brain actually fills in all of these information. So we also think about all of those things. If the frame is if the timeline between one frame to another frame is too long, also it takes away the main story from the people, and we don't want the people to find your story to be very hard to read, or it can be an easy read. And when you think about, for me as well, also when I make all of these frames, I make sure that after 5 to 6 pages also I'll just have one huge spread, because just like running, you're running and running, you just need a breather. So the same goes with the story, as a comic also. After 5 to 6 pages, we need one full illustration so that the mind or the brain also can just have a breather for a little while. So all of these things, for example, also when you have a scene that is a fight scene, a scene that makes, that an uneasiness in the readers. So we have multiple frames happening, all, in different angles, etc., creating this, in the mind that it's something, with all of the edges, that something dangerous is happening, or something that is uneasy. So, for example, like in The Hobbit also, what they've used is that when they narrated like how he has fallen, you could see that the frames also were, made in such a way that it's not balanced, so that the mind also can associate with the story itself. So all of these factors play when we, it goes hand in hand when you plan the story and you plan the visuals as well.
All right. So what about the, your medium that you've chosen for this, for the Tendrai, as well as these, the paintings that you've done? Is it all done virtually, like on a
Yeah. Digital platform.
Digital platform,
yeah.
Or?
So the one that we've done with Tendrai, initially, like any other enthusiastic artist, you get a lot of hope. You're like, I'm going to do this graphite, and come 15 pages, You've been sketching with just graphite, and you just realize that you have another 20 more pages to go. And the thing about doing it manually, it leaves very little room for corrections, because once it's done, and it becomes a little bit much more laborious to actually go back and change. And one of the factors also we've observed in Tenrai also is that the consistency, of the first page and the last page should be, should relate, should have the same style, should have the same effort. So as I say, the same strokes. So these are the things that were mindful at the start, but as you go along, it became a little bit more laborious for me. But when we started with even like Tenrai, the way we started with the style also, it's much more a very detailed style, which it's very time consuming. But when we worked with Siramandala Foundation also, we knew that the books will resonate more with, level 2 and level 3. So the illustrations also are much more cartoonish rather than Tenrai, which is for the young adults, where we have a little bit more of closer to the human anatomy. But over here we have an exaggerated, expressions, etc. So all of these factors, especially knowing who your audience or who the end users are, plays an important role on how I select my style.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about audience, and so how is it that what is your, when you the feedbacks that you get from people, reacting to your comics? How is it like their understanding of when it comes to reading a comics and actually reading looking at the comics and reading it, and compared to reading the stories, and seeing the reaction, of a folk tale or a folklore being, how do I put it, produced in a visual way. What was their reaction? So how did people react to your work? So initially?
Tenrai also came out. I think one thing that is good about the COVID pandemic is that I could sit at home and rework on it. So when it started, like I said, as a master's degree program, a project. And during the Viva, and we got a lot of feedback from experts who are in the visual narrative field, Dr. Shillong and others who have given me a lot of pointers to change a lot of things, to be mindful of a lot of things. And so after that, I worked with TCS, but it was work from home. So after work, I could actually go back to the drawing board and revisit all of these comments or feedbacks that, I can change all these small things. And so after that, when we launched the book and released the book, and Sir Frederick is here, he was the one who released the book in 2022, Tenrai. And so after that, when the people got to know about it, because it was an age where many of the youngsters were into manga, so it was nice for them also to see something from our culture, to see in the manga style. Yeah. So it was a positive feedback, and
Any particular choice, like you've chosen a manga?
I think, so because what happened was during my master's degree, most of my friends were from Japan. And we were heavily, in anime and everything. So we always meet up at a cafe and we start working on our novels and everything. And they showed me a lot of styles, I learned a lot from them. They showed me a lot about their culture and a lot about how they represent their illustrations and everything. And one of my friends, Noel Jothis, she's an animator who's, she worships anime. So it really actually stemmed from, they were the ones who actually inspired me to take up this style as well.
Any anime in particular?
I've always loved, Full Metal Alchemist also. So there's obviously Studio Ghibli, and one of the recent one that I'm watching is Spy Family. So,
okay. I was even for me, my favorite mangas was Kentaro Moira with Berserk and all. So let's go. Let's just deviate a little bit from uh, the visual aspect. I'm talking about your views when it comes to. I was I was talking to you about earlier about how people perceive your work, and when it's now that it's in the public, like they all know you, you can identify your work based on just by looking at your paintings. You can easily tell that it's your work. So we're talking about art sensibilities, and strictly regarding people here in Shillong. Uh, they've been really, they're really the way they've been able to buy artworks, like to consume, to buy. They're really interested now. So, what do you think has brought about this change, and what is your take on that?
So one of my, I think when last time you said that it's in every household,
Yeah.
right? Most of my, because so my main idea is accessibility. So it's sometimes artwork is meant only for the people who could afford. Now many cafes or people who want my artworks, they tend to, they all they say it straight to my face that we can't afford it. But there's another way that we can actually make it affordable. We create art prints for them, and they're very close to an original artwork, and that's how how it propagated in every household and many guest houses and many of these restaurants, etc. And yes, and because of the choice of the theme, also the theme is a lot to do with our own folk tales and our own, society and the Yodo, etc. And so the people, they tend to associate those things, and especially these illustrations are from the past, things that we don't use anymore. So yeah.
Surely you must have inspired a lot of upcoming young artists as well. So what is your final take, your message to them? So young aspiring kids who wants to take up, becoming a graphic artist, an illustrator, so on and so forth.
I think for me personally also, I'm still in this journey of exploration. But I think one of the things that helped me move on is that for me, I think I have this talent that I have, and therefore to waste it, it'll be so illogical for one to live without, without exploring all of these. So for me, it would be you have one of this, make use the best use of your talents, and to go forth, go out there to find the opportunities, rather than waiting for the opportunities to come to you. So that's how I got to where I'm going, in this way, but that's how I've always been. So yeah, I think so. I would say that.
Okay, so thank you so much, Mario Pathaw, for that wonderful discussion, and hoping that, wishing you the best for the future and for your future projects as well.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much to Mario and Kenneth. As we are running a little behind schedule, perhaps any questions from the audience can be directed at the book signing. Once again, a heartfelt thank you to the illustrators for gracing us with their art and engaging conversation. As a token of our appreciation, we present a small gift from the Shillong Literary Festival in recognition of their contributions. We once again especially thank Mario for his insights and sharing his journey drawn from the stained glass windows of the cathedral in Shillong, and especially how art serves as a means of accessibility using visual storytelling to impart knowledge and connecting with others. Thank you so much once again. We will now be moving on to our next session for we will now be moving on to our next session. I kindly request Mr. Vikram Seth and Ms. Malvika Banerjee to please come forward to the dais for the session. moderator. Look for the moderator. Please give a warm round of applause for Mr. Vikram Seth. This session is titled A Suitable Author, Reading and Reminiscences. For our session this evening, we revisit the monumental work of an author whose epic tale on the intersection of personal and societal narratives is one of the most celebrated in Indian literature, capturing the social and personal dynamics of post-independence India, spanning cities and generations, whose work, A Suitable Boy, remains one of the most evocative portrayals of love, identity, and post-independence societal change in Indian literature. For this session, I am honored to welcome Vikram Seth, a celebrated Indian writer and poet. As an award-winning author, Vikram Seth is known for his sprawling narrative on post-colonial India, delving into love, familial relationships, and societal changes. He has received numerous accolades for his contributions to literature, including the Padma Shri and the SARC Literary Award in 2011. Moderating this session, we are joined by Ms. Malvika Banerjee, who is a woman of many hats, a journalist, an entrepreneur, and the founder and director of the Kolkata Literary Meet, whose work celebrates dialogue and reflection of the multitude of politics, social issues, and cultural events. Her insightful analysis and compelling storytelling have made her a prominent voice in Indian media, particularly highlighting the nuances of life in Calcutta and the broader social cultural landscapes of India. Let us give a round of applause once again to Vikram Seth and Ms. Malvika Banerjee. The floor is yours.
So in the season of cherry blossoms, we are all gilding the lilies. So there is nothing much I can say about Vikram, which hasn't been said before. We were 17 or 18 in the late 1980s, when we read this book in verse, which is about a few lost souls in San Francisco and their love, their friendship, their disappointments, and their triumphs became ours. So from that moment onwards, it's been a wonderful journey of 35 years with Vikram, first knowing him as an author, and then knowing Vikram Seth in all his wonderful, multitudinous avatars. So thank you, Vikram, and tell us how you came here in a Jimny.
I came here in a Jimny. First of all, thank you, all of you, for being here, and Malvika as well. I came here because of you, as you well know. I don't normally do... does it sound all right? Can you hear me? Okay. It sounds very sort of cavernous and resonant to me. But as long as it sounds okay to you, that's fine. So what happened was that Malvika heard that I was floating about the Northeast. So she... who had not succeeded in getting me to her own literary meet in Calcutta, because I really don't attend literary festivals. She said, well, why don't you come to this place? It's got lots of cherry blossoms. It's got a totally eccentric chief minister who sings.
I didn't say that.
Well, she implied it. And she said that if you survive the driving here, then they'll welcome you with open arms and broken legs. So that's how I came here. What happened was that last year, yes, I don't know where to begin this story. It goes back quite far. Last year, that's not for suspense, that's just because I needed to wet my whistle. Last year, I bought a Jimny. Now, a Jimny is not an old man's car, and I'm old. It's a young man's car. But when I went to the Polo showrooms, Volkswagen, I guess, to change my rickety car, which was now 12 or 13 years old, they had a number of nice cars, but none of them was in the kind of red color that I liked. They had a red. It was a sort of, I'm sorry to say, but it was what is known as a cherry red or cerise, which is not this lovely pink color, but a kind of dark maraschino cherry, sort of dark, slightly depressing color. I knew every time I stepped into the car, I'd get depressed. So I looked around for red cars, and a friend of mine said, look, I've ordered 2 Polos. I said, 2 Jimneys. I said, what's a Jimny? You mean a gypsy? He said, no, there's a new car, Jimny. Why didn't you ride in one of them? And if you like it, fine. So I rode in it, and I liked it, and I liked the color. And then the car kidnapped me. What happened was that I wanted to go to the Valley of Flowers. An old teacher of mine had died, and he'd always told me to go to the Valley of Flowers, and I never had. And after his death at the age of 90-something, I said, for Guru Dayal Singh, I am going to go. And I began the journey. The Alaknanda was flooded. There were problems in getting across. And little Jimny pointed towards Badrinath. And so my driver, who's kind of slightly dharmic, he said, why don't we go there, Sahab? So I said, all right. And then there were a number of landslides because the Valley of Flowers is really only in bloom in July and August, the sort of height of the monsoon. And a number of landslides later, I was forced to go to Kedarnath because I couldn't get back home, and then to Gangotri, and finally to Yamunotri. So, in the wrong order, of course, you're supposed to take the water of the Jamna and the Ganga, and then lay it at the feet of Kedar and Badri, Shivji and Vishnu. So that was the first kidnap. I got back home, I said, now I can relax. But before I knew it, the Jimny had taken me around the west, and then to the south, all the way to Rameshwaram and back again. And finally, I said, I've had enough. I've got a novel to write. I'm not going to put up with your wiles. And I phoned a friend. I said, I'll go to the east sometime next year. Can you give me a bit of advice? He said, what are you doing in the next 5 days? So I said, I'm writing my novel. And his reaction was, I am going to Arunachal Pradesh. I've been asked to do a number of photographs for a book for the governor. Why don't you come along? You'll see parts of the country that you've never seen before, that you won't get access to. So I spent 2 weeks in Arunachal Pradesh about 4 weeks ago. And then, where does the Jimny come in? I couldn't have 3 journeys with the Jimny and 1 without. So I summoned the Jimny with my driver from Delhi, and he met me in Dibrugarh. And then we went through Nagaland, through Arunachal, through Tripura and Agartala, through Mizoram, then to a state that I was sought to be dissuaded not to go from going to, Manipur. But we went to Churachandpur, or Lamka, as they call it there, to Kangpokpi and to Moreh, also, of course, to Imphal, and finally back through Dimapur to Shillong via Assam. So, having been in a state of some alarm when I was in Manipur, but also great interest, and it's also a horribly moving experience seeing what people are suffering from there. I've come to a place where it's all cherry blossoms, and I suppose I could be dissolved by the rain at Sora or trampled by the rhinoceroses of Kaziranga, but those threats are comparatively minor. And the Jimny, or Jimny Mata, or Jimny Devi, as I reverentially call her, has taken me north, south, east, north, southwest, and now east. It's a long answer, not a very literary answer, but a factual one to that question.
So most literature happens, yes, exactly, we require that, yeah.
I consider that applause to be applause for my incredibly, and my wonderful car, of course, but my intrepid driver, Vinay Pratap Singh, who's probably not here, but you can have a round of applause for him as well.
Wonderful. So now we leave your Jimny parked wherever it is near your hotel.
It's parked in front of the hotel, resting, breathing, while I'm taken around by an Innova.
Yes. So now we shall travel back in time with no particular car or model or color and go to Golden Gate.
From my Vahan to something quite different.
To your Itihas. So, I was talking about the Golden Gate, and that was when you just sprung into public memory and the public imagination was caught by this story, which no one could imagine was written by an Indian. It could have been written by anyone who lived in San Francisco at that time. And I remember you saying this at your first appearance at the Kolkata Literary Meet, and only one of two, that you were happiest when somebody in San Francisco said, this is authentic to my life. And that, to you, is the greatest testament to an author's imagination when it resonates with the person or the people it speaks about. So the session is called Readings and Reminiscences. So do you need to really read it, or do you know it offhand? The matrimonial ad for John Brown.
Oh, for John Brown, the matrimonial ad. This is before the internet, so you would advertise in the newspapers for a mate. And John's loyal ex-girlfriend, Janet, seeing that he's sort of not come down in life exactly, but he's depressed perpetually, she doesn't want to hitch up with him again, but she wants to find a mate for him. So, what does she? Yes. She meets John at a Chinese restaurant. And she says, it's sad to see you look so lonely. That's all, John. John does not confute Jan's passionate words. He thinks if only things were that simple. Moved and mute, he sits and stares as little bubbles fizz in his beer and his grand troubles just dissolve. Well, I'm a lucky man to have a true friend like you, Jan. You may be right, but if I do it, who knows what sort of person I'll wind up with. He attempts to smile, but fails. He sighs, I can't pursue it. I'm sorry that I'm such a pain. It simply goes against my grain. So Janet advertises on his behalf. But what does she, what is her ad? She's sitting with her two cats, Cuff and Link. Sated with requisite nutrition, they eye her milk and Weetabix as she reads out her composition. Young, handsome yuppie, 26, straight, forward, sociable but lonely, cannot believe that he's the only well-rounded and well-meaning square lusting for love. If you out there are friendly, female, under 30, impulsive, fit and fun, let's meet. Be rash. Box blank. Cuff off that sheet. It's just been typed and now it's dirty. I guess your paw prints, the cat's purr, can serve in place of signature. But earlier she'd said to John, when he says, yes, he's complaining. He says, I'm young, employed, healthy, ambitious, sound, solvent, self-made, self-possessed, but all my symptoms are pernicious. The Dow Jones of my heart's depressed. The sunflower of my youth is wilting. The tower of my dreams is tilting. The zoom lens of my zest is blurred. The drama of my life's absurd. What is the root of my neurosis? I jog, eat brewer's yeast each day, and yet I feel life slip away. I wait your sapient diagnosis. I die, I faint, I fail, I sink. You need a lover, John, I think. That's what Jan says to him.
So you thought about a term that is now quite prevalent, the quarter-life crisis.
I didn't realize there was such a thing. Of course, a quarter-life crisis, since John is 26, is not a 10 quarter. It's like a 5 quarter. But they say that 100 is the new 20.
So has anyone told you that the Golden Gate in some ways, I mean, it's on the other coast, but Friends is also has the same. Has anyone said this to you?
Yes, they've said it's a kind of glorified literary soap about the Golden Gate. But they've said the same thing about A Suitable Boy. I don't take it as an insult at all. I like soaps.
No, well, I didn't quite mean it as an insult. What I meant it
of
is
course
this,
you didn't.
What I meant is this whole thought of 5 young people trying to find love in a bustling metropolis. You thought of it before Chuck and whoever else.
Yes, and that girl, Janice with the nasal voice, and the one who was smelly cat or scaredy cat?
Phoebe, yes.
Phoebe.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I quite enjoyed that. But, yes, but my coast is the West Coast when it comes to the United States. I spent 11 years there in the economics department not getting a PhD. So that's my coast for view.
But there's something about those who don't get their PhDs and their
Well, I've got
MBAs from
some
Harvard.
PhDs. I've got
and Stanford.
dishonest PhDs, the ones that people throw at you. But no, I haven't got a PhD in economics.
Yes. He was at Stanford, if it counts for anything. So, going on from there to poetry, you went back into, and is it a collection of something you'd written earlier, or you wrote at the same time, All You Who Sleep Tonight?
Yes, I'd self-published a book of poems, mappings, because, I couldn't get any publishers, so I just thought, well, I'll publish it myself. And I published it in the States first, and then I got something which is quasi-self-publishing, the great Pilal, who has launched so many writers, but you have to pay to get published. Of course, you had to. That's the only way he could, make a going of it. The next book of lyric poems was The Humble Administrator's Garden. And I've written more books of poetry than I have of fiction or prose, really. And I do see myself at heart as a poet.
I was going to come to that later. So, why do you say that? Why? Because you've written these 2 much-loved novels, one in verse, admittedly, and then there is A Suitable Boy, and there is also An Equal Music, which is, according to many, the best novel you've written. Yes. So, why would you say that you see yourself primarily a poet?
I find prose very hard work. I find fiction very hard work. And the creation of characters and stories and so on, it's not, I've always thought it's not exactly my métier, except that I find it is. With poetry, there's a great pleasure. When you've written a certain stanza or a verse form, there's a kind of a joy, a click, where the rhyme and the meter and everything fit in together. With prose, it's always unfinished. You could take out a few sentences and put a few in, and it would be fine. Whereas with poetry, if you just change the month from April to May, your rhyme will go wrong. There's a kind of rightness about it and a memorability to it. In prose, say for example, A Suitable Boy, all I can remember is the first sentence. You too will marry a boy I choose, said Mrs. Rupa Mehra firmly to her younger daughter. But ask me to quote a single other line in that fat book, I wouldn't be able to. With poetry, yeah, I could quote stuff.
Would you also say that you love words, that you love the play of words and the sense of what they can do with meter as well as what they can do with rhyme and a double meaning and, the whole architecture of a poem somehow draws you to it more deeply because of your love for words?
Yes.
Okay.
No, sorry. You want me to elaborate on that?
You've done acrostic poems.
Oh, yeah, that's true. There's
a poem in A Suitable Boy where each verse has Lata, Lata, Lata.
Yeah, the 2 characters are, Amit writes this to his inamorata, Lata, L-A-T-A. And the first letters spell L-A-T-A. It's called an acrostic. Yeah, so I like that kind of stuff. But, eventually, the feeling of a poem doesn't lie in its technique. It lies in its emotional content, or how it can move people. Because poetry really is there to amuse or console or evoke or to make one think. And the technique should be there, but well hidden, I think. Similarly, with a novel, if you've done a lot of research into a particular subject or a particular period, in order to make it real, especially to the people who've experienced that. Malvika mentioned earlier that I thought that my book would be a failure, even if everyone praised it. But say a musician thought you were playing on the wrong string in an equal music, or a San Franciscan thought it didn't ring true, or a person who lived through the Nehruvian era in Indian life felt that somehow it didn't ring true. So again, you do a lot of research, you talk to a lot of people, but then you've got to remove the research from it. You've got to scrub that out of it. Otherwise, it's a dissertation, not a novel. And no one likes being preached to or taught within the four corners of a novel.
So do you think you can now read us one? If I've pulled out a couple of poems,
Sure.
anthologies, so
Do you have a
whichever.
particular, All You Sleep Tonight. That is one poem I can remember by heart. Something else. Sure. Here you are. A Style of Loving. Okay. You know, how about one that's in words of one syllable? I've got All You Sleep Tonight here. This is a poem that I spent 2 years in China doing research in economics and demography. And one of the reasons I did that was because I wanted to go to China to where some of my favorite poets lived, Wang Wei, Du Fu, and Li Bai. And so I learned from the Chinese style of classical poetry to write poetry in words of one syllable. And here's a poem called Walk. That's interesting. You think that's a metaphor for my relationship to Shillong? Might be. An adhesive tendency. Walk. I walked last night with my old friend past the old house where we first met, past each known bush and each known bend. The moon shone and the path was wet. No one passed by us as we strolled at our sad ease, though hand in hand we did not speak. Our hands grew cold, yet we walked on as we had planned. We did not deal in words or tears. At the dead light we did not rage. What change had crept through our forked years we did not have the will to gauge. The lights went out. Who lived here now, paid rent and saw spring come and go, lived past the range of why and how for those who had no wish to know. There's another poem in the same book which I wrote called Soon, which deals with that period of AIDS. I don't know if I can find it. It is in this book, I know. Oh, here we are. I shall die soon, I know. Again, words of one syllable. I shall die soon, I know. This thing is in my blood. It will not let me go. It saps my cells for food. It soaks my nights in sweat and breaks my days in pain. No hand or drug can treat these limbs for love or gain. Love was the strange first cause that bred grief in its seed, and gain knew its own laws to fix its place and breed. He whom I love, thank God, won't speak of hope or cure. It would not do me good, he sees that I am sure. He knows what I have read and will not bring me lies. He sees that I am dead, I read it in his eyes. How am I to go on? How will I bear this taste? My throat cased in white spawn, these hands that shake and waste. Stay by my steel-ward bed, and hold me where I lie. Love me when I am dead, and do not let me die.
So after these intense poems and with the whole world talking about you for your wonderful ode to San Francisco and your amazing poetry, you come and write a 1,000+ novel about India in the 1950s, about punching politicians and slightly effete young handsome men and a woman in the middle of it, a young woman in the middle of it all trying to choose her life partner. So this mammoth leap you took from, Chinese poetry and a book on San Francisco to this. What made you take this leap? What was the story that was like a kida in your heart for so long?
Sort of beneficent kira, maybe a glowworm, or a jugnu, or a firefly perhaps. I was partly homesick, and partly I knew I didn't want to continue to be an economist. I just felt, after writing The Golden Gate, that I could possibly, make a sort of living out of writing. I knew it would have to be a novel, and I wanted to write about my family, basically. So I came back home. I was in my in my early 30s, and I decided to sponge off my parents, which I would advise all of you to do if you need a patron or a matron or both. Home is the place where if you have to go, they have to let you in. That was by Robert Frost, I think. And so, my needs were humble. I'd have food and a whiskey with my father in the evening, and minimal clothes, and people would ask my parents, so he's sort of an economics graduate from Stanford. Now, surely, how much does he earn? And they'd say, minus 20,000 rupees a month. And so there I was, writing my book. And I thought it would take a couple of years. But that sentence that I recited, you too will marry a boy I choose, meant that someone else was getting married. So the thing began at a wedding, lots of wedding guests. I got involved in all their stories, and finally I found that the goalpost kept receding. And together with the love story came the politician and the politics of the time, the land reforms, the Hindu-Muslim conflicts, the position of women in the society, how courtesans were slowly losing their patronage, and all that. So that's how it growed like Topsy. And it turned out to be 1,500 pages in its final version. That's after I had cut out 500 pages, which I thought was somewhat unnecessary.
So this book has now become a focus of a lot of speculation about what comes next. And you've learned to live with it over the last decade.
Yeah.
But do you sometimes feel that question is like an elephant in the room or on the stage, and everyone's asking you or want to ask you, when is the sequel coming?
Is that an indirect way of asking that question?
Maybe.
Maybe. Well, I was writing that book when Kunal said, what are you doing in the next 5 days? Let's go to Arunachal Pradesh. So if I keep indulging in these, what is known as displacement activities.
So should we ask all car manufacturers to stop making red cars and then steal your Jimny? Will this help?
Well, I would say it's too late, because I'm not going to allow Jimny to be stolen. She and I are kind of adhesively attached, so to speak. No, the first book, The Suitable Boy, took a long time. A Suitable Girl is taking a bit long. It's taking considerably longer, I'd say. But I'm well into it, and I'm not writing anything else. So, I've heard lots of deadlines from publishers have whooshed past, and each time I've had to return the money that I took from them, which is fair enough, because I haven't produced what they expected. But now I have no bonds, and as a result, I'm writing better. I have no debt, no advance to a publisher. I sit in my room with a blue duvet, the same blue duvet on which I wrote A Suitable Boy, and I use it as a kind of desk, and that's how it goes. Write your books in bed. That's what I advise. But don't smoke.
So, in the middle of all this, out came this wonderful little translation of Hanuman Chalisa. So, is it part of The Girl, or is it something that took place on its own?
This is strange. I guess everyone knows pretty much the Hanuman, or knows what the Hanuman Chalisa is. If not, let me just say it is one of the most iconic hymns or poems in the Hindi language, or the Awadhi language, you might say. It's called a Chalisa, or a 40-verser, because there are 40 couplets or chaupais in praise of Hanuman and all his various exploits. And there are 3 dohas as well, enclosing it in. Now, I translated it 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, for my own pleasure. The Hanuman Chalisa is something that's always been around with us. In fact, it's probably better known than any other poem in the world other than Happy Birthday to You, or a particular Chinese poem on homesickness, about watching the moon. But I didn't show it to anyone. And once I read it at the Patna Literary Society, the Patna Literary Festival. Then my aunt, Usha Mami, who lives on the ground floor of my house, she's 91 years old, she said, "Darling, you've got to share it with people." I said, "Usha Mami, I haven't polished it. I haven't written an introduction to it. And at the moment, with all this sort of Hindu nationalism going on, the last thing I want is that it should be fuel for that kind of fire." She said, "Well, even if it's..." And also I said, "It's nothing compared to the original." She said, "Even if it's a small window into it, why not? It's a great poem." So I said, okay. Then I was going to publish it this year. I'd written the introduction. I was going to publish it this year on Hanuman Jayanti, his supposed birthday. It's the full moon of Chaith, month of Chaith, Chaith Purnima. Suddenly I looked and realized that would be just before the elections. So I said, absolutely no way. It'll be madness. It'll just get swallowed up and misused and so on. So I published it on my birthday in June, and I made sure that the introduction that I had written in last November would be published with it. And by your leave, I'll read the end of that last, of the introduction. I hope I have it. Yeah? I thought you had it. I think I did. Oh yeah, I do. So first I talk about the prosody and the rhyme structure and so on and so forth. But then at the end, I talk about one of my own characters in A Suitable Boy called Bhaskar, who was a very young kid who was a mathematician and loved both numbers, and he also enjoyed, like kids do, running about and taking part in plays. And one of his favorite roles was one of the Vanar Sena, the monkey army at the annual Ram Leela in the town of Brahmpur. So I wrote, I dedicate this translation to Bhaskar, who learned the poem before he was 5, but who spent his 50s fighting the chauvinism and intolerance to which this and many other well-beloved religious texts and rituals have been put. Nothing could be further from the humanity and inclusivity of the best of Hinduism than the self-aggrandizement and willful cruelty of those who use the religion in which, in the lottery of life, they happen to be born, in order to attack or demean others. May the Hanuman Chalisa continue to spread joy, expand imagination, and give strength and solace to its many past and future readers. But I had great fun translating it. For example, I wanted to keep the rhythm and the rhyme so that that incantatory effect of the Hanuman Chalisa would be maintained. So something like... it could be the first few lines, yeah? Okay. That everyone knows. Exactly. Like Jai Hanuman Gyana Gunasagar, Jai Kapisa Tihu Loka Ujagar. So that I translated as Hail Hanuman, great wisdom's ocean, the three worlds glow with your light and devotion. And so on. It went like that all the way to the final Doha. Pavanatanaya Sankatharan Mangalamurati Roop, Ram Lakhan Sita Sahit, Hriday Basahu Surbhoop. Son of the wind, crisis dispeller, blessed form I implore, with Ram, Lakshman and Sita, dwell thou in my heart's core. That's the style of the thing.
So was the challenge in keeping that amazing tempo of it?
Yes. English doesn't have a lot of, like, English is more like ta-tum, 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 and Hindi is more tum-ti, tum-ti. So it's a falling rhythm, and it's like to be or not to be is English. And Hindi is jai, and English is quite poor in these rhymes like ocean, devotion, feminine rhymes, so-called. So that was one of the challenges. By the way, in England, the house I bought there was the house of George Herbert, the great Anglican, I think to my mind, the greatest Anglican poet ever, greater than John Donne. And I don't know what business the church had to selling his house to pay off their financial debts. They made some bad investments in the 1990s. So that's what they did. I was, and other people were the beneficiary. I bought it, and his little church just across the way, where he wrote some of the most. Anyway, he preached his sermons. He died very young at the age of 39, and I felt his presence there for a long time and wrote a number of poems in his stanza forms, in his style. I mean, India is very lucky. We have a tradition of Hinduism. We have the tradition of Islam. We have the tradition of Judeo-Christianity. We don't really have the Sino-Japanese tradition. But we have three of the four most populous traditions in the world. And what madness it is that we should be reducing our access to the wealth of the world by saying, oh, this is Indian and that is not Indian. Let us not be foolish.
I think on that note, we can take two questions.
I think we may have exceeded our time. Let's take two questions. Democratically, one from the left and one from the right. Yes, I can see one hand up. If you can't hear the question, I'll include it in my answer. Oh, there's a mic. Good.
We'll be taking two questions.
Just two.
So, firstly, I'm a big fan of your poems. And, obviously, as a writer, you might experience things like writer's block, very famous, being thrown around these days. What moves you back to the writing desk when you're,
The question of writer's block and what moves me back to the writer's desk. As I said, I don't have a writer's desk. I have a writer's duvet. But let's take that as given. If I'm stuck, I can't speak for other writers. If I'm stuck and there's a kind of a wall, a plot wall I can't get through, or I can't visualize what will happen next in the novel, then I don't just give up. I try to batter the wall, knock it here, try to pole vault over it, or get around it, or dig under it. But if it doesn't succeed over a longish period of time, then I'll put it aside and try to do something else. Occasionally that works. It may not even be writing a poetry. It might be just listening to music or traveling to the Northeast or something. But in fact, there are a number of my manuscripts which have not succeeded in being resuscitated or revived. In that case, my economic hat comes on and I say, sunk costs are sunk costs. Or consider the opportunity costs of wasting more time doing this when you could do something else. So that's how I deal with it.
Thank you, sir, for that
Sure.
answer.
And the last question from this side, I think. I'll ask a question. I'll point to a random person and ask for a question from there. Yes, the gentleman or the lady in the white hat over there. Your turn to ask me a question. Yes. So, oh, sorry, a gentleman. Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, yeah, if you like.
Let me start by saying it was a pleasure hearing you talk.
That's why I selected you.
Right. So I guess what I want to know was how at this age you're still traveling and you're still living life to the fullest, it seems. And are you still, is that what inspires you to write? Is that like writing, you said, you started with saying that writing was a passion for you.
Yes.
But at this age, like a lot of people stop writing at a certain point, you know, whether writer's block or whether they just want to retire, but it seems like you're still strong and you're still vibrant. So what's keeping you going on?
Oh, well, I mean, we have examples of Tagore in our tradition and others who've written till quite late. I mean, I tried to cultivate a long white beard. It didn't work. But luckily, although I do suffer from senility, I also suffer from dyslexia. So 72 can become 27 in my imagination.
So before we call it an evening with Vikram, and there are two amazing sessions ahead as well, could you just read two poems? One is All You Who Sleep Tonight, and then we'll end with Fire. So you have it with you there? Or you don't need to read?
All You Who Sleep Tonight is an 8-line poem. There was one line in it, know that you're not alone, which I struggled with, and finally changed it to know that you aren't alone. I wrote the poem in about 10 minutes, but that one line cost me about 8 months to get it right. It's all you who sleep tonight, far from the ones you love, no hand to left or right, and emptiness above. Know that you aren't alone. The whole world shares your tears, some for 2 nights or 1, and some for all their years.
And since we can't end on that note, there's a poem from the revered earth called Fire, which is also very short, which I have to leave the stage for him to totally own it and read it. Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you. Thank you for getting me here.
You can stand and read it.
Ma'am, kindly stay on.
It requires a tiny introduction. This is part of a libretto which I wrote for a friend, a composer, because music to me is as important as speech. I'd written a poem which he liked the poem, but he said he liked it, but he couldn't set it to music. So I said, well, what's the matter with it? He said, well, nothing really. I mean everything. I said, so you don't like it? He said, no, I like it a lot. So I said, Alec, you're talking in riddles. He said, it's a bit literary and, indirect. The other poems I can work with. And this one, fine as a poem, useless as a text. After a while he added, couldn't you just go back and write something else? So I said, no, I couldn't. This was the fruit of my inspiration. I couldn't just go back to the muse and say, sorry, you've done your best, I've done my best, but my composer, who actually likes the poem, has nevertheless rejected our work. I was in fact quite annoyed. By now I had moved on and was working on other things. I couldn't revert to the elements just to appease a fussy composer. But upon looking at the poems, I began to think that Alec had a point. It was a bit literary and it was quite difficult to make sense of it. But what could I do? Time was short. I couldn't see how the same poet, within a couple of months, could write 2 completely different poems on the same subject, fire, and with the same title. Eventually, as the deadline approached, Alec told me that the paradox was easily soluble. He suggested I go home and get drunk. This irresponsible advice worked. The muse, or maybe a different muse, re-emerged, not unwillingly, from the fumes of the wine, and the second poem, also called Fire, was born. I still don't know what to think of this particular poem, which is different from anything I have ever written. And rather than read the first poem, time is short, I will just read the poem that I wrote on the subject of fire, the second one. Fire. Fire. Oh, fire, fire, fire. Desire. Hot, hot, hot. I'm burning a lot with desire. Oh, fire, fire, fire. Hot as a filament wire. Hot as prawn jambalaya. I'm burning so hot. I'm baking a pot. Oh, hot, hot, hot as desire. Fire, fire. All was born from me. All your eyes can see. Who gave life and birth to sun and star and earth? Who gave pulse and germ to man and beast and worm? Who is hot, hot, hot when black space is not? Who is bright, bright, bright in this endless night? Fire, fire, fire. Fire, oh, fire, 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 desire. Hot, 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 I'm burning a lot with desire. Oh, fire, fire, fire. Hot as a funeral pyre, leaping up higher and higher. I sizzle, I daze, I fizzle, I blaze, I scorch, I toast, I smolder, I roast, I flare, I excite, I flash, I ignite, I rage, I lust, I blaze, I combust, red, yellow, white, I light up the night, this endless night with desire. Oh, fire, fire, fire! After that, some water. Well, I blame you for that.
As we draw to the end of this session, we extend our heartfelt thanks to the illustrious Vikram Seth and the remarkable Malvika Banerjee for sharing their wisdom and memories with us this evening. Before we bid adieu, I kindly call upon the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Bapol Lingdo, to kindly felicitate our guests for this evening. Sir? Let's all have one round of applause, please. Thank you so much, sir. And so, with words still lingering in the air, we leave this session reminded that in the world of literature, every author is not just a storyteller, but a keeper of stories that bind us all together. A suitable end to a truly inspiring conversation. Thank you so much, sir. Additionally, if there are any other questions, I'm sure Vikram Seth would be more than happy to take them up and address them at the book signing. Thank you.
Shall I carry these books? Okay. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for we will be starting our next session shortly. literature has the power to reveal the depths of human emotion, and our next session explores a poignant narrative of self-discovery, identity, and resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by Jerry Pinto, one of India's most celebrated authors. His works include the Sahitya Academy Award-winning M and the Big Home, the critically acclaimed Murder in Mahim, and the recently published The Education of Yuri, which is our book in focus. Pinto is also a celebrated editor and translator with accolades like the Wyndham Campbell Prize for his contributions to literature. In conversation with him is our very own Janice Paryat, an acclaimed writer and recipient of the Sahitya Academy's Young Writer Award and the Crossword Book Award for her debut book, Boats on Land. Her novels, The Nine-Chambered Heart and Seahorse, have gathered widespread praise, with the former longlisted for the JCB Prize for Literature. Her latest work, Everything the Light Touches, is a masterful, multi-layered exploration of our relationship with nature. Renowned for her lyrical prose, Janice intricately blends the cultural essence of Northeast India with universal themes of love, identity, and nostalgia, creating stories that deeply resonates with readers. Ladies and gentlemen, let us have another round of applause for Jerry Pinto and Janice Paryat. The floor is now yours.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, that was very generous and very beautiful. Thank you. Good evening, Shillong. It is absolutely wonderful to see you all here. It's a little bit cold, so I hope you're keeping warm. Welcome to Shillong, Jerry. I know you've been here before, but I haven't welcomed you on stage, so all those other times don't count. Absolutely. No?
Absolutely not, especially because Janice and I are kind of joined at the hip in some ways. There's a JP connection. Both of us have names that start in JP. And there was this moment when you won it for Nine-Chambered Heart, right?
The Boats on Land, yes.
And I won the same crossword award, which was split in two, and we won our crossword awards together. Me for M and the Big Home, and we waltzed all over the stage and generally had a great time. Yeah.
Jerry did that. May I just?
Yeah, anyway. So it's lovely to be back and in conversation with you again.
Yes, it's always wonderful to be in conversation with you, Jerry. And we're here to talk about The Education of Yuri, which, as you know, is a book that I absolutely adore. For those of you who may not have picked it up yet, it's a book about growing up. It's a book about that very, very difficult in-between phase between childhood and adulthood, and perhaps it's a phase that one never quite really grows out of. So in some ways, the education of Yuri, as the education of us all, continues over a lifetime. But I would like to start with Yuri himself and expand the question to include characters. How do characters come to you, Jerry? Are they encounters that you've had? Are they people that you've met? Are they characters that you carry with you all your life? Where do they come from?
I think, one of the things that makes me very sad, and I'm talking here to the young people in the audience especially, when I see you with your ear pods in your ears, and you can't, you're not listening or talking to the people around you because you're so involved with your phone, with your cell phone, what you're doing is really cutting out humanity. And you're focusing on something that has been served up to you, right? Now, if you're going to be a writer at all, no, if you're going to be a human being at all, if you're going to enrich the experience of being a human being, it can only happen if you encounter other human beings in the flesh. You encounter them by listening to them. You encounter them by asking questions of them. You encounter them by witnessing their stories, by listening to their stories with complete attention, full on Pay attention with your eyes, with your noddies, with your smile. Encourage them to speak. And know this, for a writer in India, India is glorious because we don't give a toss about privacy. My first experience of, my first long-distance journey was at the age of 35, I think, because my mother was ill, as I've written about in M in the Big Whom. So I never left Bombay till the age of 35. And I was going this time to Banaras, 36 hours on a journey. And I got into the train, and there was an old man sitting there next to me, and he had a bandage on his leg. So I said, "Uncle, what happened to your leg?" And he said, "What to tell you, son?" All this in Hindi, of course. And he said, "See, I had an operation." And he undid the bandage. And he showed me the scar of the operation. And then he said, "Give me your hand, give me your hand." And he said, "Press here." Okay. And press here, and something oozed out of that scar. And he said, "See, now I am going back to the Ganga. She will cure me. Those doctors could not cure me," etc. And then he said, "Paratha khaoge?" And I thought, yes, khaunga, but really after I've washed my hands. So where do the characters come from? The characters have to be part of our openness to society, our openness to each other. When we the reason I think why we've become an intolerant society, why we've become a kind of othering society, is because we no longer look into each other's eyes and recognize each other's stories as being important. Because we're always looking at those phones. I tell my young students, I'm looking at you, miss, you have a more intense relationship with your phone than with your mum. You can do without your mum for 8 hours, but you can't do without that smartphone for 8 hours. Okay, so really the phone is more important. It is time now to recognize that technology is taking from us who we are. And if technology does that to us, then
just sitting
all
here,
the benefits of it are shams. Right? So, for me, I used to be able to jump onto the stage, right from there. Now I use the stairs. But for me, it is about being open and being willing to listen to everybody and to pay attention. I met that neurobiologist, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
we were talking about my neurobiologist to my mate.
Yes, and we know his entire life story now. But I think what you do so well is you bring that humanity to your characters. Yuri is this 15-year-old. He's young, he's vulnerable, he's a little bit underconfident. He's making his way out into the world as a young college student. And he wonders to himself not whether he will make a mark in academia or be the top of his class. He's asking, will I find a friend? Right? And I thought that at the opening of the book is what allows us to enter Yuri's life and Yuri's story with such humanity and with such openness and with such heart. I'm also intrigued by the cartography that you're working with. So we're sitting here in Shillong, talking about a book that is, that was in your honor, Jerry. We're sitting here in Shillong, talking about a book that is very anchored in Bombay, right? And we're kind of diametrically opposite. I mean, we're literally at the other end of the country, geographically speaking, and in other ways as well. And I know Bombay a little bit, not well enough, but I've always wondered why does Yuri live in Mahim like you do? Why does his friend Muzammil live in Pedder Street? Why is it Elphinstone College in that particular part of Bombay? How do these places build into your story? Why this particular cartography?
Okay, I think it's, Mahim is simple. I'll try and sit, okay, for this answer. But I can't promise. Because sometimes it's just that I feel there are lights and there's you, and I actually want to talk to you.
Yeah.
I don't want lights in my face. So, one of the things about writing is that you have to be safe. In some ways, you have to be safe because writing a novel is an unsafe thing to do. It is completely like imagining a universe and building a bridge maybe, and you're walking the bridge even as you build it. So you put your step forward, and underneath a brick must actually materialize. So you have to materialize the brick and step on it. Why? Because in reality, this is a lie. Fiction is a lie. But this lie has the ability to be much, much more real than the truth, whatever that truth is, right? Tell me something. Which non-fiction book from the 19th century are you still reading? Which non-fiction book from the 17th century still holds as much power over us as King Lear? Okay? It is the lies of fiction, the well-told lies of fiction that survive and become truths. Okay? So for me, the safety of Mahim, the safety of Bombay, the safety of knowing that if I'm sitting at home and I close my eyes and I let Yuri walk down a street in 1981, I can tell that on the left side, this was happening. I can tell that he will then confront that Gola Sharbat wala or that sugarcane juice wala who's been there for 40 years. I know this. And because I know this and I'm safe here, I'm safe in my concreteness, right? I can then invent anything I want. I can take him and I can throw him into the air, and you, because you read and you care, you'll catch him and you'll hold him. Okay? So it's really like that feeling, that cartography for me, Janice, is the cartography of pitching safety against terror. Okay, because this is what every fiction writer knows. Every fiction writer knows that if we all stopped writing, there are enough books for the rest of our lives. There are enough books for everyone to read.
Yeah.
Most of us haven't even started the Turgenevs and Dostoevskys and Lady Murasakis and Marcel Proust's that are waiting there for us. Why do we write these novels? We write these novels because we need them. Meaning, I need to write my novel. You need to write yours. Then we act in faith. And we send them out because we hope there's someone out there who needs that novel too. Just as we have needed novels that we have read and which have actually built us, made us into writers, made us into people, made us into caring individuals because, we've read about other people's experiences and understood that the world is not just my viewing of it. It is 100 million different viewings. And in that 100 million different viewings, we can all at some point respect each other.
I love that thought. I love those many thoughts. I'm just going to ask you a question that I hadn't quite planned for, but it has arisen, and so I will ask it. Yeah? How did writing The Education of Yuri change you? Why is it a Bildungsroman? What was it about a Bildungsroman that drew you to writing it?
Gosh, Janice, you always manage one question per session that I have to actually start afresh. And I have to think like what... okay, when you're within yourself, right? And you're writing, the writing is actually a fairly... almost, for me, it's a mechanical act. It's... it's put the words down on the page. It's, I need to do these many words per day. I'm writing this novel, I'm committing to it, I'm working on it. It's actually what drives me and keeps me going is, if I finish 1,000 words today, I can chill and do Netflix. It's like my work, my job is done after that, right? So while you're actually doing this, nothing that you are doing is actually... being recorded, and then you come out on the other side and you look back and you think, oh my gosh, what just went on there? Because, Yuri started as a short story. Okay? Yuri started, at one point there was this, publishers, bless their sweet, benighted hearts. There was a moment when young adult fiction was very large. Everybody was reading young adult fiction. There was such a big readership. Everyone said, we want young adult fiction now. And of course, the answer was simple. young adult fiction was because of that, The Fault of Our Stars, where two young, beautiful people, are both terminally ill and make the beast with two backs. And kids all read it across the world, very rejoicing in this fact. So that passed. Young adult fiction went back to being a slim little genre. But someone rang me up and said, will you write a short story about, for young adults? And I thought, what can you write about for young adults? And I thought, okay, most people have had this experience of having a friend when they're very young. You went out and sort of talked to someone when you were 3 years old. Your building, your first school, that sort of stuff, it was easy. It wasn't easy for me. I was not a confident child. I was in fact fairly, I was bruised and battered fairly, not just by circumstance, not physically, but I felt the world was a hostile place, right? Now, you won't think it looking at me today, grandstanding like this and coming down off the stage and doing this big shtick type thing. But this is a long journey for me, right? The first time I went to school, I just looked at the number of people there were and I thought, I will never hack this. I will never be able to do this. I was incontinent till the second standard. Everyone knew that my mother was insane. It was just awful. And this was a very violent school on the top of it. And I was entered in school when I was 2.5 because, my family didn't know how to deal with my mother. And so, at least put them in school early. So all this was going on. And so when I finished school, I went to college. And I remember actually praying on the first day of college. I want a friend, just one. I'm not asking for more. I just want one friend. Okay? And within 6 days of this prayer, I was answered. I made a friend. It was the most exciting thing in my life because at some point, some teacher said something and I started smiling and turned and saw that someone else was smiling. A shared sense of humor. The feeling that you can look around and look in someone's eyes and they immediately know what you're laughing at. It was such a wonderful moment. We became such good friends. And for about 3 years, I just lolled about being a friend to one person. And I think, I overweighted that friendship. I put everything I had into it. I just wanted everything back out of it. And that's not how friendships work. So one day, I went to the library where my friend and I would hang out all the time, and he wasn't there. So I thought he's ill. I actually thought he can't have come to college if he's not in the library waiting for me. And then when I was leaving college, I saw that he was sitting somewhere else with other people. And it is horrible to say this. I'm feeling a little naked right now, but my heart broke. I really felt really seriously? You were sitting somewhere else with someone else? And because I was brought up male, I couldn't say this to him. I couldn't just say, why did you do that? And we drifted apart because just the next day you couldn't say it again. And the third day, it was final. You're never going to be sitting together now. And it's all right. It's okay. It took 20 years. And his daughter to grow up and to say to me, Jerry, what happened between you and Daddy? Okay? And I said, nothing much. And she said, no, tell me. And I started telling her, and I found that I was about to cry. And I thought, I've carried this story. I've carried this story somewhere inside my heart, neatly packaged and put away, safely. By then I'd become like a journalist, I was writer, everything. So there were other sources of selfhood. And yet this hurt you know what you said, Janice, about like that, you know, we're growing up and that person never actually goes away somewhere.
Yeah.
That fellow was alive somewhere inside my heart. And I thought, then I should be writing this story. This is the story I have to write. About friendship and about betrayal and about it not really being betrayal, but it feeling so much like betrayal that it can only be betrayal, but it's not. And I started writing a short story. That anthology died a death quietly somewhere. And I found that I had written some 50,000 words. It was no longer a short story. Then I had written 100,000 words. And then I thought, okay, I'm actually writing a novel, it seems.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and that's how it grew. So really, I think, you know, one of the most we talk so much about love and about how important love is. And oh gosh, love is important. But we forget how many shades there are of love. It's not just about the love between a man and a woman. It's about the love of friends. I wanted to unpick that in a way to see what lies behind.
What lies behind that? And you get that in the book. There are these characters whose lives entangle because they're at university together. And what a time to be young, to be alive. And there are moments in the book where that sense of possibility emerges with such power that you are young and the world lies, you know, before you. And yet all of these other things happen, right? The friendships suddenly end. The love doesn't quite work out. The family is sometimes not there. So all of that humanity, I can see that you've, you know, poured all of that humanity into the book, which is what makes the book what it is. Just a quick question about process. You said that you started this as a short story. It became 50,000 words, so not quite a short story anymore. But is this how it tends to happen, that you write this first draft with some kind of frenzy and fervor, and then you look back? I'm asking as an interested co-writer as well.
Okay, you know, it is sometimes such a joy to know that there is no rationing of words. You know, like no one has said that you have to do a 60,000 word book in 60,000 words. You can do it in 700,000 words if you want to, and that reassures me. So what I do is, I mean, okay, a little codicil here. Many of the stories that writers tell about themselves are written post facto. We tell the story about the story. And that's part of the job that we do. But here's the truth. I have written about one successful word, which by successful I mean printed, for every 10,000 that I have destroyed. You know, like, I mean, I write much, much more than I will ever need. And I write because I have the reassurance that in the edit, I can kill that word. It can be erased forever. But at that point, okay, I'm very sentimental somewhere. Inside my heart, I'm a very sentimental person. So I cry when I'm reading books. I cry when I'm watching films. You know, sometimes I can see a puppy in the street and it can start me off. I'm a soft touch like that, okay? And likewise, I can laugh at anything. I'm easy to set off in a way. Now, I know that when I'm writing, if I clog you with sentiment, then you can't respond to me. So I need to then, when I'm looking at my stuff, tear out all the sentimental chunks and make sure that there is space for the reader to come in and feel with me. Okay? So this means, this is what I define as killing your darlings. You know, the things that you have loved, the things that you have cherished when you're writing, sometimes may not be the things that you need to say in order to get the response that you want. So my friend Melli Gobhai, the painter, used to quote his teacher Knox Martin, who always said, the bartender is never drunk. The bartender's job is to make you drunk. And therefore, the writer has to produce the situation in which you will feel the emotion. That's the job.
Yeah. And just to bring up sentimentality and, this soft sense of fuzzy nostalgia, because it's so easy to fall into that mode of writing and of conjuring that atmosphere, especially in a book that is set in the past. Yeah, and by the past, I mean the early 1980s, which honestly feels like so long ago now, but it really isn't. It's not ancient history at all. It's not that long ago, but it is also a very different time, as we know, right? And here we have Yuri and his friends at college blissfully unaware of things to come, right? They don't know about the rampant liberalization of the 1990s. They don't know about the rise of the right, about the rise of Hindutva. They don't know about, the chipping away of, socialist, secular India. At some point that is to come. But we do. You do. We do. So we're reading the book working with two very different timelines. And I was wondering, how is it that you write from a moment of here and now about the past?
One of the things is always the temptation to give your character second sight, or the ability to see into the future and know that this is the danger point. This is where the tipping point will happen. This is what is going to overturn the apple cart, such as there is an apple cart. But in that time which now we look back in as that palmy, beautiful past, it was a time of deep distress too. No young person today can understand what tension young people of the middle class and lower middle class went through just thinking about getting a job. Because every week, some magazine or the other talked about overpopulation, another magazine talked about brain drain, and the third magazine was talking about unemployment. And these three were linked. There were too many people, therefore there were no jobs, therefore there was a brain drain, people going abroad and taking education away. It was just a complete circle, and it seemed like there was no way that we were going to be able to break that circle. And everything seemed like a charmed circle, like a closed door. If you wanted to be a writer, you had no idea how to be a writer. If you wanted to be a poet, who could you tell that you wanted to be a poet? If you wanted like many people just wanted a job. It was amorphous. A salary at the end of the month was as much as they could hope for. It's so different, and I'm so glad that now young people dream improbably wonderful, multicolored, I'm going abroad and doing my MFA, and then, I don't care if I have to be a waiter in New York, but I'll be a writer too, and it's great. I love it. I love that confidence. I love that feeling that, the world is my oyster, and I'm going to study filmmaking in Prague. But really? Whoa, okay, very good, enjoy yourself. That wasn't our time. Our time was the employment exchange. Our time was the scrabble for seats in college. Our time was the BA was what girls and duffers did. It was just an incredibly different other world. And when I stepped back into it, and the good thing about being a compulsive writer is that I've kept a diary since the age of 7. So I started reading my diaries for college, and I realized that I was in a lot of pain. A lot of one was the great betrayal, one was the heartbreak, the other was the sense of, were you male enough? The other was, can you ever become an economic actor? The third was, what is your political stance in the world? How do you take a position? How can you be sympathetic to rural poverty and not take action against it, direct action against it? All these were things that we were wrestling with on a daily basis. So at any time, life is difficult. And nostalgia is the pretense that life was easy. It was better in that time. Not so. Never so. Never.
And what helps Yuri? Because Yuri, and this is a very particular kind of Bildungsroman, because it's the growing up of a writer, right? He's not just looking for a job. He's also figuring out am I a writer? Will I find the space to be a writer in this very confounding world? But what he does find is some kind of mentorship. So the Bombay poet Nizam Ezekiel makes more than a cameo appearance in the novel. And he holds what we might call nowadays a poetry workshop. There is this kind of camaraderie that I've heard about and that I've read about with the Bombay poets, right? That there was support rather than hostility. And I wanted to know if that was true and if you were beneficiary of that, if you were a recipient of that mentorship.
I think it has something to do with it being Maharashtra, actually. Because of all the states that I know, Maharashtra is, the Marathi person is resolutely democratic. Okay, resolutely unimpressed by people's achievements. They look you straight in the eye, whether it's the taxi driver or the person who's washing your floors. They treat you as another human being and you have your problems too. Simple. So, Adil Jassawala was available to us. Nissim Ezekiel was available to us. Arun Kolatkar, available. Eunice D'Souza, available. Arjun Shad, if you were writing in Sindhi, available. Popati Hiranandani,
That's
available.
amazing.
Vasant Abaji Dahake, available. Where was this myth? Where was this myth that Mumbai was a city that was hostile to the arts and only paid attention to money? Kafi Azmi came there. The Urdu poets came there and found a living in Mumbai. They would have starved if they lived in Lucknow with all the glorious tehzeeb in the world. They would still have starved. But they came to Mumbai and wrote one Hindi film song and they were, they could pay for a month's food. Okay? So I remember this moment so clearly. I'm walking down the street and Giv Patel, another great poet, is walking up to me with a man whom I don't know. And he says, "Hi, Jerry." And I say, "Hi, Giv, how are you doing?" And he says, "This is A.K. Ramanujan. And we are going to see Nissim." And I say hi to A.K. Ramanujan. I'm a great admirer of your poetry. I've got some work, I'm going. And I leave. And I hit myself on the head thinking, why didn't you give up whatever two-penny work you were doing and go and sit where three of the greatest poets of India, Ramanujan, Patel, Ezekiel, were going to be sitting and chatting. Whether they talked about where to have tea, didn't matter. You should just have been there. And instead I went off to do whatever idiot work I was doing. It's like, so how blessed we were that these men and women made themselves available to us. How blessed we were in the poetry circle. I make ruthless fun of the poetry circle in the poetry corner. Yeah, because we also had some really wonderful moments where very special eccentrics would turn up at the circle. But there was Ranjit Hoskote, Arundhati Subramaniam, the living Chola bronze. There was me, there was Nissim also, Adil coming often to them, Arvind Krishna Mehrotra coming down and doing workshops with us, for the price of a train ticket. He said, second AC ticket to Bombay, I'll stay with my brother-in-law and I'll come and do a workshop with you guys. A.K. Ramanujan did Shanta Gokhale. Everybody came and just shared wisdom. Just shared wisdom. They didn't ask for money. My deep sorrow is that there is no forum now in Bombay for us who are now heading towards our 60s to be able to do this for young people. The Poetry Circle was special, was so special. The Theosophy Center where Nissim sat, with his legs up on this thing, his socks torn. You walked in and he said, hello, 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 hello. And you said, Nissim, I've written a poem, I'd like you to hear it. And he said, yes. And he would listen to your poem. And then he would say, you have a comma at the end of line 1. but you don't have a comma at the end of line 3. Why? And you want to say, Nissim, I want you to tell me I'm a genius. I don't want you to tell me about commas. But what he was doing was directing your attention towards your craft. He was saying, after you have written the poem, have you done your best work with it? Have you paid attention to the smallest detail, to the commas and the full stops and the whatever punctuation you want or you don't want? Have you made it the best possible poem before you dared to show it to me? But he did it gently by just pointing out commas. He was a fine mentor to all of us. And when I put him in, I was so glad for his presence. Because he was, I remember telling Adil once, and this shows how unbalanced I am. I remember saying to Adil, I'm so glad I met Nissim first and not you or Dom, because y'all were drunkards. And I would have thought it was necessary to drink to become a poet. And then I thought, what are you saying? And Adil being Adil just laughed and said, oh, anyway. And we're still friends. So that shows you the kind of people they are.
Well, Ezekiel is a wonderful presence in your novel. I would obviously wish to continue, because I have many more questions, but I will be generous and open this out to the audience, because I'm sure there are questions. Jerry is just the most wonderful.
Anyone wants a mic?
Approachable. Yes.
Yeah, and it's an AMA. You can ask me anything, including how much were you paid for your last book. Okay? All questions are open and available. But Sharminda na kijiye, don't make me tell you about small quantities of cash. Not especially when Shobhaa is sitting in the front seat. The last time I met Shobhaa, she stepped out of a beautiful, out of an SUV, looking completely elegant, and I said to her, she said, I've just come after 9 hours of traveling. I said, so what were you doing? She said, oh, there was a bidding contest for my next book. And I thought, gosh, there will one day be a bidding test for my books. There is no bidding contest. It's good that it's a friend who's having a bidding contest. I remember thinking, bidding contest kabhi hoga.
One day, Jerry, one day.
No, actually it's because I just Ravi Singh. So I finished the book and handed it over to him. Poor Kanishka was supposed to be in the audience because he's my agent.
He's there. I can
He's there. There he is. Okay, poor Kanishka. He doesn't get to do any of this stuff because I just hand it over to Ravi. Any questions? No questions? There, over there. Yeah, young person in nice cap.
Do you need a mic?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions for you, if you don't mind. One question is, we read your book. So we have a Tura book club where we read your book.
You read my book?
Yes.
Come and get a hug. In your book club.
There's a Tura book club. I'm just loving this.
Yeah. Okay.
Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions for you, if you don't mind. Hello. Yeah. So this was regarding M and the Book. I want to know, is it a semi-biography?
Okay, it is 95% autobiographical. 95% of what is in the book actually happened, and 95% of it is fiction. Now you will think, see how clever he is and whatnot. But, okay, where does anyone draw anything from, You draw it from your life, right? All the stories, all the things that you do are from your life. But when you present them in a novel, you can't write your life. If you put a real life person in a novel, it'll kill the novel. You have to trim them and cut them and shape them and fix them into the novel. If you're doing an autobiography, it's different. It's fine. So when you're trimming and cutting and shaving and shaping the person, you are already doing savagery to the life. You're reducing that person to fit them into a novel. I apologized to my mother when it was done. In my head, she was dead by then. I said, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to do my best. By the way this was, to show it as the way it was, I have to shrink you and shrink wrap you and fit you into the novel, because the novel has certain demands. So therefore fiction and therefore non-fiction. At the same time, can't live with it, so sorry. But are you a policeman? Are you a librarian? Are you a journalist? These are the only 3 people who have to separate fact from fiction. The rest of us can just read books and enjoy them.
Right.
Yeah.
We loved it, but coming to my second question, you talked about how there was no poetry circle in today's Mumbai.
Yeah, there was, like one young woman came up to me and said, hey, I want to make a poetry circle. And I said, go, do it, enjoy yourself. And if you have a poetry circle, call me, I'll come and read as well. Okay, because I really missed reading out poems to other people and having people listen. But I met her 6 months later and said, did you have the circle? And she said, yeah, we had one meeting and it failed miserably. So I said, what happened? She said, everybody read and left. They were not listening to anyone else's poems. So finally it was me and one person. And that person said, why am I reading to you then? And he also left. And I was sitting there feeling sad. So I think, a little bit of what has happened with social media is we have all become like, broadcasters. We are not listeners. So please, if you have a reading club and you're going to have a poetry circle, it's such a simple thing to do. A few poets in a room with copies of the poems in front of them, all reading the poem carefully, paying attention to it and making suggestions. No suggestion has to be carried out because it's that guy's poem. He or she will decide whether the poem will change or not. But you can make the suggestion and then step back. And in listening to each other, you sharpen yourself and you sharpen your sense of the poetry. Go try it now and then tell me what happens, Brian.
All right,
yeah?
Thank you.
Thank you. Clap properly. Yeah. Hate VD clapping.
Hello.
Okay, we got another question anyway?
Yes, a small one.
That's not Brian again, no?
No, it's different. I'm Jyotirma. I actually teach English literature at Nehu Shillong. And yes, I did my master's from Pune, so I also have some interest. And that's also true. In Pune University, these people like Adil Dusawala, Nissim Ezekiel, even Gift Patel, they used to come. And they used to tell us that, call me by my first name. Like they would say, call me Adil. It was so different. For us, it's culturally, we used to say Sar and all that.
Yeah.
So they had that kind of approach towards the young people at that point in time, which we said that is quite true. They were quite inspiring. My question to you would be for another book of yours, which I was just reading when I heard they were coming to Shillong. Then I thought of reading some of your books. I hit upon your Helen.
Hey!
Okay.
Hey!
So
I'm so glad you read Helen.
Yes, and that is because Helen is, of course, we also grew up with Helen and we imagined Helen.
Didn't we all, man? Didn't we all just enjoy her welcoming, celebratory attitude to the body? When you see an item girl now, they all kind of like, as if you're never going to, teri haath na aayegi ye ladki, that, you won't be able to get me. Helen was like, come, dance, sing, let us rejoice together. And that was such a wonderful thing. That's why I loved her. Tell.
And while reading the first, even one good thing was I came to know that she also has some kind of Northeast connection coming to Assam and all that.
Absolutely.
That was something quite
you
unique.
guys saved so many Indians coming out of Burma. In Nagaland, in Assam, they took the trains here. My grandfather, I have a Northeast connection. My grandfather walked from Burma in 1944-45. Came up to Assam, then took the train to Calcutta, where he was reunited by his family, and then they came to Bombay. So thank you so much, the Northeast, from all of us who did that great walk. Clap for yourselves, yeah?
My question is, you wrote that you never met Helen.
I did, but I'll tell you the story later.
Okay.
You and I will tell. Because, with Bollywood, yeah, and Shobhaa, they will tell you a lot about Bollywood. I mean, I feel like so stupid saying anything about Bollywood with the grand dame Shobhaa Day of Bollywood, because it is a dark place. It's also a dark, very brightly lit spaces where there are lots of very large lights are very frightened of their own darkness. Okay? And film studios tend to be like that. But I'll tell you about the Helen story later.
No, yeah. The only thing is
If you buy the book.
How do you imagine a character like Helen and bring it to the audience? And how normally we think that we have to have too much of research and meeting and interviewing and writing.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Frankly speaking, I'm not really interested in how people, when you talk to Hindi film stars in general, they give you a manicured view of the past. They will never tell you the truth, okay? Because the truth is just too savage. They can't tell you the truth. So they will tell you a version of it. You know, Rakhi ji used to make her fish curry on the sets, and it was all a picnic where we all sat together. Rakhi ji did not make her fish curry, she directed the fish curry. Can you imagine Rakhi actually cleaning fish? That's nonsense. Anyway, they tell you that story and everybody believes it, right? Helen hints at those darknesses in some of her interviews. She says, I was 13 when a big basket of fruit was sent by a producer. The next day, a big car came and took me away to the studios. 13. Producer, fruit, studios. You read between the lines and you see what a darkness there is there. Okay? And still out of that darkness has been produced one of those entertainment industries that has brought joy to thousands, millions of people over decades. Okay? This is what I was looking at. This is what I wanted to talk about or to look at. I don't want to talk about like who slept with whom, because I don't think it's important. I think what's important is how is this magic of this story. You know, when people say the oral tradition is dead, I say it's not dead, it's alive in Bollywood. There they don't read scripts. You have to go and act the script to the actor, and then they will agree to do your film or not. The oral tradition is, so it's a very interesting place, but people are only interested in the sexual politics of everybody, and I'm not interested in that. So I watched 350 Helen films to be able to see what she meant to us as viewers. That's what I'm interested in. Yeah? Anyone else? Thank you. And hey, here's the thing about Helen that you should all remember. In Hindi films, an actress gets like 2 or 3 years and then she becomes a mummy or a dadima. Okay? Helen vamped 3 generations of Kapoors. Raj Kapoor in Annadi, where she dances 1956. And he says, Hui ma, when she comes next door. Raj Kapoor understood and could tell you how frightened men were of women. Okay? Then she vamps Rishi Kapoor. Okay? And she vamps Prithvi Raj Kapoor in Harish Chandra Taramati. 3 generations she's there. 30 years she's dancing. She's 45 when she does Mehbooba and does a back bend, man. A full back bend. That's achievement. Yeah.
Hello, sir. I had a question.
Yeah.
Here to your right side.
Hey.
Very good evening, respected sir. So I had a question.
Hey, try Jerry, na. Say, hey, Jerry. Come on.
Hey, Jerry.
Hey, well done, young person. One step forward for democracy. I'm bringing Marathi Pana here. Chal.
Sir, I had a question.
Jerry,
I had a question regarding, you shared about your life stories, about how you suffered and struggled. And basically, do you think if you didn't struggle, would you have been a competent writer? Because we have this perceived notion.
Oh gosh, I always think when I'm saying it, I'm doing this trauma dump on you. Okay, and it was fairly awful certain moments, but I also had a great time, okay? I read lots of books, I ate lots of tamarind. Our school had a graveyard in the middle. There was datura growing in the graveyard. You could take flowers home and say to yourself, I'm going to poison the whole family. All kinds of shit you could do. It was wonderful. My growing up was a mixture of wonder and terror. And so I did that one number when I'm standing and walking around and saying, oh, my mummy did this and they were very violent to me. But it isn't the whole truth. Okay, so I think life throws you a lot of jalebis and then follows it up with a lot of tatti. Okay? So your job is to jump for the jalebis and duck the tatti. Okay? And some of the tatti will hit you. But you have to wash it off and wait for the next jalebi. Okay? Because the jalebis are coming, but the tatti is also coming. Okay? So duck the tatti, grab the jalebi. Duck the tatti, grab the jalebi. Isi ko kehte hain zindagi.
Thank you, sir.
On which happy note. Thank you. Thank you all very much. My books are available there because itna sara hum nahi karte taki aapko enjoyment ho. We are happy that you enjoy it, but we wanted to buy books also. So please go and buy books. Thank you. Thank you, Janice, for tolerating this. And I'm going to stay here only. And Shobhaa is going to come up on stage. And Janice, we are so sorry to lose you. But a big round of applause for Janice. Thank you.
Janice Mariat, I request you to kindly stay on stage. What an absolutely fun and engaging rendezvous that was with the remarkable JPs. Absolutely. We thoroughly enjoyed every bit of your conversation. As a token of appreciation, I would now like to call upon Mr. F.R. Kharkongor, Principal Secretary, Department of Arts and Culture, Government of Meghalaya, to present the mementos to our speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for them. Their words have painted a vivid picture of the complexity of self, reminding us of the transformative power of storytelling.
Gold coins.
If anyone has any further questions for our speakers, they may ask them at the book signing area.
Shobhaa.
Well, thank you so much, Jerry Pinto, for that magnificent session. And ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the close of day one, we have a session that is sure to inspire, entertain, and leave you with plenty to think about. Daylight is a conversation between two extraordinary storytellers who have each in their own way changed the way we look at the world through books. First, we have the trailblazing author, Shobhaa. Shobhaa, voted by Reader's Digest as one of India's most trusted people and one of the 50 most popular women in India by Daily News and Analysis, is one of India's highest selling authors and a popular social commentator. Her works, comprising both fiction and non-fiction, have been featured in comparative literature courses at universities abroad and in India. Her writing has been translated into many languages, including French, German, Hungarian, Italian, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, and Turkish. She lives in Mumbai with her husband and 6 children. And joining her, yes, is the ever-brilliant Jerry Pinto, who needs no further introduction, but who I believe has charmed everyone with his wit, warmth, and sheer storytelling genius in the last session. I was completely captivated by every motivating words he shared, and I know that when these two authors come together, you can expect a dynamic conversation that's as insightful as it is entertaining and interesting. So without further ado, let's give a warm, heartfelt welcome to Shobhaa and Jerry Pinto.
Shobhaa, it's us again. But Dilip is here, yeah. Why did you bring him?
What nonsense. Jerry, just behave yourself. You've had your moment. Now just calm down.
Okay.
I can say it. I'm much older. And we've known each other forever.
We've known each other
I just want to say that you actually should be in the movies yourself. That was a performance. I mean, Amitabh Bachchan, Jitendra, Govinda, Vicky Kaushal, you name it. It was a combination of all of that. And, you know, it was just magnificent watching you on stage. I mean that with complete... And that too, you were unscripted. It was your own script. You weren't even reading someone else's lines. I think that's fantastic. Really, truly fantastic.
Thank you so much, Shobhaa. That's really important. You know, and it's also important coming from one of the most acerbic viewers of society and of cinema as well. But right from the beginning, there was something of the model breaker of stepping out of what was perceived as kosher. Let's just start with the reinventing of English, which is really one of the things that we all owe to Shobhaa, is the confidence to remake the language of the colonizer according to the sound that is playing inside our heads. So let's talk a little about that, Shobhaa.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because quite often I'm asked it, but not quite as eloquently as you just did, and giving the right context to it. It's important to say how that happened, to share rather with everyone here, since they call me the mother of English. Now it should ideally be the grandmother, the nani or the dadi of English, because it's our way of expressing ourselves. And it happened when I was editing. I was the founder editor of Stardust, and and Stardust is 52 years old now. So that gives a context to those who may or may not be aware of the power that Stardust exerted at one point. Not just because of how it was irreverent, how it, in many ways, humanized the movie stars, made them really real people, not just godlike creatures, distant fantasy figures, but the way we used language. Now, I was very, very fortunate that I had a publisher, Narihira, and God bless his soul, we lost him a few months ago, who at no point tried to inhibit me or curb me from how to write that magazine. How to write it was the breakthrough. Now, had he turned around and said, this does not sound like the Queen's English, and why don't we just stick to the way we've been taught English? And that was the whole point of breaking through for me, because that wasn't the English I was hearing. That wasn't the English we were speaking. And I was far more interested in street speak and Bombaya Hindi. And Bombay is truly a melting pot of just about language and culture and foods and fashion and all else. So on the streets of Bombay, which was Bombay then, you would hear a fantastic masala mix of Gujarati, Marathi, Tamil, you name it, a bit of Portuguese, the Goan, the Konkani. There were words that were musical and far, far more expressive than anything that Jane Austen could possibly have written. So I started to use street speak, street lingo, in rewriting a very racy column which was written by our reporters. But the style and the approach to that column, Neeta's Natter, was set by me. It sounds immodest, but I used to have fun rewriting stuff and making it just more accessible. When I started to do that, there were, of course, contemporaries. Contemporaries are always your strongest, harshest, and critics who keep telling you you're doing everything wrong. And that's the time to keep doing it because you know you're doing it right. And that's exactly what happened. They would say, oh, probably she didn't go to the best school. And it was, in fact, a Scottish missionary school with a Scottish missionary a principal who detested me, thank God. Because if she had approved of me, I wouldn't be me. So in that sense, we have actually so many similarities I discovered as you were talking this evening. First of all, Mumbai has shaped both of us. Mumbai, we owe Mumbai a big one. I don't think Mumbai would have, any other city in India would have tolerated me. And I just would have been a very different person. So we both owe Mumbai, big time. So that's how the language happened. It was colloquial. It was how we actually spoke to one another. and then it became mainstream. After all the criticism, the headlines of Times of India started to sound like stardust. And I said, goodness, after all that one faced, all the flack, every newspaper, every news magazines had adopted the stardust lingo. And then that's how then English became what it is today. And it's just a much richer way of expressing ourselves. It's our own version of English, and we have every right to that version rather than what we had to borrow or was thrust on us. And in any case, Jerry, as a teacher, professor, or yourself, language is fluid. It's not written in stone. And with each generation contributes to language with its own vocabulary. And it's
like lol.
Yeah, lol is today, yeah, and all the acronyms that we've gotten used to. And every culture, it's like a river that's flowing, and from the shores you pick up so much as language keeps moving forward. That's exactly what happened with English, and to answer that question of yours.
You know, if I were to take you through Shobhaa De's trajectory and her life in the culture and times of Bombay, we would probably get to Insatiable tomorrow morning. You know, like, I mean, by then we'd have been talking about everything, including billboards and what she knows about Bollywood but will never tell, and all the other things that people have wanted to ask her. So I'm just going to cut to the thing.
Yeah.
Tell me about that first book, when you sat down to write the first book, because up to then, we all knew you as, you know, like...
A columnist.
A columnist, but a fabulous columnist. I've always said to my students, the two columnists that I think you should read for the lightness of touch, but the accuracy of commentary, are Shobhaa De and Anil Dharkar, you know, God rest his soul. Because there were many, I mean, Dom Moraes for how to write stodge, really, like big chunks of pudding, you know, which you can... which often rested on seeing Stephen Spender in 1984 or something. But anyway, let's just get to that moment when you're starting to write a novel for the first time. Now you're on your own. You don't have a subject. You don't have a topic. You don't have a deadline. You just know it's a novel. It's you. And here, get this. I think most of the first novels were written on paper by hand and then typed out. But good handwriting, I've seen it.
Well, at the time when I wrote the first book, it was a commissioned book. So unlike a lot of writers, I don't really have a hard luck story to put out there to say, oh, there I was, gnashing my teeth, pulling my hair, wondering, I've written these 100,000 words, it's a fantastic story, is someone ever going to publish it? Is someone... Because at the end of it all, no matter what people say, a writer writes for readers. You write because you want it. You want to share it. It's got to be in the public domain, or else you'll be writing a diary and reading it to yourself. Well, like you, I've been journaling since I was 14, but I never reread any of it because God knows what I might discover that I don't wish to. But that first book was, I was already an established columnist. I was writing for the Times of India.
You were famous.
I hate that word because
you were famous. Now, whether you hate the word or not,
I hate it. I hate it. It comes with baggage. It's a loaded term, and I don't like it.
She was infamous.
Oh no, infamous I prefer to famous. But at any rate, I was a known is a better word. Oh, better word. Thank you. Yeah, I was writing for several newspapers, and I'd love to share this in a slightly boastful way, if I may. I've been writing in the public domain for 53 years, and I've never, ever, ever missed a deadline. Whoa. Deadlines are sacred. They are non-negotiable. You commit to a column, there are no excuses. So I love the discipline that all writers bring to their work, because without that, there's really no way people think, oh, it's such a wonderful, glamorous life. You're just sitting there. The words are coming from somewhere, and you're just sitting there. Now a laptop, but back then, handwritten, 100,000 words handwritten, big fat manuscripts going to the publisher who could then decipher them. But that first book was, like I think most first books for any writer, they are in a way self-revelatory. You tend to cannibalize the lives of the people around you. You cannibalize a lot of lives of friends around you, people you've known. And mainly you eat into your own life and your own experiences because you know that best. So, but the challenge and the trigger for me when David Devidar came to meet me at home, I didn't know why he was coming to meet me. I only knew there was a very strange voice over the phone with a strange accent that I couldn't quite place. I didn't know whether this was an Englishman, an American, a Desi. But all he said was that Penguin India is coming, Penguin Books is coming to India. And we are looking for 5 writers to commission books. Pupul Jaikar was one of them. So they were very clear about what and who they wanted. When he came to meet me, he said, I want you to do a book. And as those of you who may know David, he can be very imperious. It's just more like a command. I said, but why would I want to do this book? So he said, well, it may interest you to know that there is no market for women's voices, women's books. No one wants to know, or no one cares to know what they think, what they feel, what their views are. We are unable to sell books written by women, even less poetry written by women. Always a challenge. So we were hoping that we could get you to come on board and do a book, non-fiction, he said, on Bombay, because we believe that you would be able to chronicle the city, its energy, its the pulse of the city, which you have been doing through your columns anyway. As it does happen with certain gentlemen who are quite lofty in their worldview and are doing their job, but not connecting, not seeing, not hearing. But I'm the publisher editor and I'm here to commission a book, so bow down, lady, or something like that. Perhaps he didn't notice.
Got himself the wrong gal.
Wrong gal, absolutely. What he didn't notice was it was an advanced stage of pregnancy. He hadn't noticed, of course. So I said, Mr. Davidar, I am in no position to do a non-fiction book on Mumbai. I don't see myself pounding the streets and pavements of Mumbai in the state I'm in. He still doesn't get it. So he said, I'll come back in a month. And by then, I'm sure you'll have an outline ready for me. And off he went, leaving me to say, what kind of a man is this? Of course, we are great friends, and, that was a religious. But I said to myself, if he thinks there's no scope or there's no room for a woman's voice, it's time to show him that there is. So I thought about that. It was a trigger for me, but I forgot all about it because I was busy having the baby. He calls back, the baby is born, and he says, I'm coming across maybe in a couple of hours to read the outline. I said, outline of what in my head? So I said, oh, the outline, of course. Yeah, sure. And I wrote the outline of that book, the first novel, with an eyebrow pencil on the back of a laundry bag. I can't tell you how it came to me, because it's very difficult for a writer to say, what was that point? That's why I couldn't quite answer you. I don't know. Maybe it was panic. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was what the dickens, the worst that can happen. He'll look at it and say, is this woman mad? Is this how you do an outline for a book? Look at the way she's presenting it. Does she not know who I am? I'm the great David Devidar from Penguin Books, and Look, it's so shabby, I don't even want to talk to her. But he did turn up. I did present the laundry bag. And he said, I think it's a great story and you should write it. Then I was stuck. Because I was hoping he'd just reject it and let me go on with my life and my babies.
And he wasn't offering much money either.
Well,
Oh.
let's say it wasn't too bad. It was enough for me to think it's worth the effort. And that's how it's remained.
No, I'm perfectly...
I mean, we must write for money. I mean, there is really no other reason other than, of course, the passion for writing and so on. But at the end of the day, it's a vocation. There's a lot of slog, a lot of hard work that goes into it. And unless we as writers have enough confidence in ourselves to demand what we think we should be paid and negotiate hard, that's where Kanishka comes in, also my agent. So Kanishka took that dirty business of negotiations from me and the publisher out of the equation. I didn't enjoy doing it, and thank God I haven't had to do much of it. It's been reasonably good, no complaints.
Just to drift to Delhi and do a couple of bidding wars.
Bidding wars. It sounds so fancy and great, but Jerry, you and I know no matter how high the bids go, we are never going to crack Harry Potter, right? So it's never going to make us billionaires and millionaires. It's just going to be icing on a pretty small cake. But at least that icing should make it worth our while, because at least a year and a half goes into the writing of a book. And I've written 26, and that's 26 multiply. I'm very bad at math. So that's at least 45 years or something of writing every single day of my life. So if the compensation is pathetic, it just takes away the fun of writing. It should at least pay for, taking my husband to a lovely bar and him ordering a martini and me ordering 3 Negronis or something like that. I mean, if even that is not there, what's the point? What's the point?
So, let's just cut again across 25 books to Insatiable, which is a book about food. And as the subtitle says, I think, My Hunger for Life, right? Yeah. Okay, so, I was thinking about it as I read it a second time. And food is deployed in a number of ways in your book, in a number of metaphors that I thought we could explore. One of them is food as a language of love.
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Oh, yes.
So would you like to talk about that?
In fact, when I started to write Insatiable, I can give you a quick backgrounder to those of you who may not have heard of it, not read it. I have written books that have marked the milestones in my life in different ways. When I turned 50, then when I turned 60, when I turned 70, all these were written with a way of chronicling not just my life, but also the life of India, because I am the exact same age as the country. So I often say that the changes in India are the changes that I have lived. So those books have always been parallel stories of India and me, and all that I have learned or not learned or experienced. So when I was about to turn 75, a year before I turned 75, I hadn't even thought of a book or chronicling it. And after 70 actually, after 60 actually, as people say, I was just shocked by the question someone asked Vikram Seth, the gentleman in the white cap, who asked him, "You're so old, how can you still be writing? Oh my God." And I said, "What will this man say to me?" And then why aren't you sort of rolling him out in your... That was an indelicate question, if I may say so.
Can we find this man in the white cap and throw him into the
and he's asked 3 questions this evening. I've been noting. I think the white cap attracts all the writers. At any rate, he's forgiven, he's young. For him, really, anyone older than 40 is already a fossil. So I sympathize. I'm sure I thought the same way when I was 40. But to mark my 75th, I said, let me do something. It just came to me like that, because food is something that is very important to to all of us, I'm sure, in a very basic way. But I thought of, it's not a book about food really, it's food as a metaphor for love and for much more and much else. And the word insatiable, which my publishers had a lot of trouble with, that people won't know how to pronounce it, they won't know what it means. And the design team had even more of a job because they thought it's a recipe book. So the first few designs that were submitted all had cakes and fruits and chicken legs. And I said, listen, have you read the book? So they said, no, ma'am. So I said, well, why don't you read a bit of the book so you'll understand? It's a book about life. It's about my hunger for life. I mean, yes, I enjoy food, but this hunger is a very primal kind of hunger. It's what we all feel, a child is born hungry and crying. It's a kind of, the word bhook in Hindi is a much better, much more emotional word, I think. Bhook says it all. Hunger, which is so deep, so profound. It can be for knowledge, it can be for fame, it can be for more money, it can be for love. Most of the time it is that, love. There are hungers and there are hungers. And I wanted to encapsulate some of those hungers. And the best way I thought of doing it is to chronicle 1 year of my life from 74 to 75, month-wise, what happens in each month leading up to my 75th birthday. So it is divided into starting from January, it ends in January. And for me, it was also hard to explain to very young designers that for me, the best way of celebrating my 75th birthday with people I love and adore, a few friends, would be with, hosting an Elvis Presley party. Because Elvis Presley has been the most profound and deep love of my life. From the time I was a little girl, it was always Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley as much more than a singer, much more. It was his innocence, it was his vulnerability, it's what he went through. So I've seen, of course, Baz Luhrmann doing the Elvis Presley movie, and there's a new documentary out. There was nothing I don't know about Elvis Presley. It's that deep, my feelings for him. So when my family asked me, what do you want as a gift? My friends actually asked me, a friend, one particular friend, and I said I would be overjoyed if we could get an impersonator to come and sing for us that evening. And we did. We got a wonderful guy called Mahmood Karmali, and he is Elvis Presley. He's Elvis Presley like reborn, like a lot of the impersonators are. But that night, after he finished his performance, and it was fantastic, the way he did it with such complete involvement. It was a very immersive moment, emotional. And I said to him, and I was crying, I said, you know what? I won't even call you Mahmood because to me, Elvis is present tonight. And it's the best gift I could have ever received. And the mood of the book is that. It's food, it's love, it's family, it's friendships. And those are the things, not just for me, but I'm sure for everyone. What else do we need? What else do we need in life? We need just that connection and just that warmth that you get from people who understand you.
Yeah. I think actually we are so lucky to live in India in some ways not. But in some ways, because, there's this wonderful variety of food, And so you come from a family of Maharashtrians, and I've always felt that Marathi cuisine deals in a minimalism. There's this kind of like...
What you're not saying is, it's really not cuisine at all, according to my husband. It's so minimalistic, it's tasteless.
No, absolutely not.
It's pretty bad.
Dilip, carry on.
He thinks so too. He doesn't think Maharashtra.
No,
He says it's nice as snacks from time to time. He doesn't consider it a meal. So I should actually read out the portion about Bengali food and what Bengalis feel, because for them food is a religious experience. And every meal is a religious experience. From the time they wake up, they're thinking about what they're going to have for breakfast. Then while they're eating their breakfast, they're imagining and designing what they'll have for lunch, dinner, and next week, and maybe for the next 50 meals, they're working overtime on that. The only trouble about readings at Lit Fest is It's very uncomfortable to turn pages and hold a book and try and, but I'll try and do the best I can. No, it's okay. I'll manage. Food connects people in the most unexpected places and in the most delightful ways. Now that Abhijit had extended a warm invitation to visit him in Boston, where he would cook for us, I'm feeling accepted. Abhijit, of course, is our Nobel Prize winning and a fantastic food writer. He's as brilliant when he's writing about money as he is when he's writing about food. He just writes exquisitely well. So that's the person I'm referring to, and I'm not dropping names. We had hosted a dinner at our home, and he had made that kind offer. In return, Mr. Day promises to cook doi march for Abhijit when he's in Mumbai. Mr. Day has cooked doi march for 125 guests, and I can confidently declare him a doi march world champion. Fair exchange. I say I'll be happy to eat whatever the two men produce in the kitchen. We talk more food. Major bongness is happening. There goes our flight, I think. Note to self, don't start even a casual conversation involving khabar or khana with hungry bongs around. Forget skipping sex. They'll happily skip their son's graduation as they salivate over Pishima's Topshe March or Mashima's Chorchori. We part company reluctantly after exchanging contact details and lingering looks. On the flight, I think about how our time with the genius was way too short. Mr. Day tells me he noticed Abhijit's strong wrists and muscular arms on an otherwise lean and mean frame. We conclude he must play tennis. Must remember to ask while enjoying our bong repast. Mercifully, I think, nobody brought up the K word, or all of us would have in earnest missed our flights. So
lovely, thank you. Okay, no VD clapping is allowed. Clap properly.
No. Don't force them. After your performance and Vikram Seth, why should they clap for that?
The Vikram Seth, and if you meet Vikram Seth, you must ask him for his David Devida story also. Okay.
We all have our David stories. David, I must call him after our meeting today. I hope someone has recorded this, just to send it to him to remind him how mean and insensitive he was to this woman.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you just rewind to Superstar India? And I think it's the latest book that has resurfaced in a way with a new introduction. So would you like to tell us a little about that?
I'll tell you a little about this book because it was very important at the time when I wrote it. It says, from incredible to unstoppable. It was written in 2008. I'm bad with dates. 2008, when the world fell apart and the financial crisis hit. And in many ways, it could be about today. Because what happened after 2008 was so radical, so dramatic, so unexpected. I mean, the whole world was in a tizzy. When they decided to reissue it this year, they asked whether I would do a kind of a 5,000-word essay to bridge the two Indias, the 2008 Wala and the 2024. And I really enjoyed writing that introduction, but it's not the introduction that I want to share. It's a very small paragraph from the book written way back then. Christmas, Agra, cold and foggy. My husband and I had driven to the city that exists for one reason alone, the Taj Mahal. Like Cairo and the pyramids, Agra and the Taj, they go hand in hand. Just like the freshly scrubbed, neatly dressed school children we saw, making their way to school, skipping along happily on an unpaved, dusty road right outside the city limits of this historic town. Our guide, Mr. Dubey, started on his spiel as my eyes followed the kids. They'd gotten off the road now and were running across a mustard field. It was a scene straight out of a Yash Chopra film. Every imaginable prop was in place. A village woman in a gungat was drawing water from a well. A shepherd was tending to his flock of well-fed sheep, using a neem twig to get the strays back in line. Sand merchants were unloading sacks at the local mandi. As mica flakes caught the light and twinkled happily, donkey carts laden with food grain took the same narrow road as hired vehicles of tourists doing Agra in a day. Tourists like ourselves. Yes, us. Tourists in our own country, the other India, the one we know so little about. And like any outsiders, my husband and I commented on the backwardness of the countryside and wondered what sort of an India those school kids would experience. Would they be excluded from the euphoria? Would they even get to finish their schooling and dream a bigger dream than their parents dared to? Worse, were they already reconciled to their current reality? Did they know that while empowered urban India was rejoicing wildly and talking recklessly about being a superpower, here in the only city of the world boasting not one but 3 significant heritage sites, the magnificent Agra Fort, the even more magnificent Fatehpur Sikri, and that other wonder of wonders, the luminous mausoleum known simply as the Taj, was pretty dismal. Shabby jhukis and jhopris line the unimpressive route to the most recognized monument to love. I thought of all the VVIPs who'd taken the same uneven highway over the years, from the Kennedys and Bill and Chelsea Clinton to Princess Diana and the Musharrafs. They'd seen our squalor too. Suddenly I felt defensive and proprietorial. So what if we didn't have superhighways and fast tracks? So what if the only impressive milestones along that road to Fatehpur Sikri were built by Emperor Akbar in the 16th century? Those school kids looked so happy, running through the field of yellow. One of them had a colorful kite in his hand, and the others were trying to grab. Maybe he'd fly it later. Maybe the kite would soar. Maybe the fog would clear. Maybe we would stop obsessing over India's destiny, trying foolishly to control it the only way we know, through great big technological leaps and cosmetic changes that conform to an accepted model of progress and prosperity as defined by the G8 countries. Great roads, great infrastructure, great communication systems, all of India neatly wired, all set to roll, glittering malls, delirious shoppers, packaged foods aplenty, a dizzying choice of cars, clothes, bathroom tiles, the wow factor. I was beginning to get slightly breathless with excitement. Everything and anything seemed possible, achievable.
I'd like to also just point out, in case you're thinking about Shobhaa Dey as this, the person who writes all these novels and books, there is another one that took on the role of speaking truth to power in the columns that came after 2014. We're all stepping very carefully here, but what I'm saying is there is a certain risk that you took in that.
There is a risk each time I put pen to paper and a column appears, but I think that's my job. If I were to do anything else, I'd think less of myself, and I would think really poorly of our citizens if the citizens were to judge me. If the powers that be decide to treat me the way they do, I take it as a supreme compliment, and I believe in that case I'm doing my job the way it should be done.
On which happy note, I would like to open this to the audience. The man in the white cap, you have a chance to rescue yourself. And there are other men in white caps who are thinking, why did I wear a white cap today? Anyway, anyone with a question for Ms. Dey? It's not an opportunity you're going to get very often. Yeah, over there, there's a lady in the back. Oh, there's a guy with a mic in his hand. Go for it, sir.
Yeah, madam, this is my first literary festival. I happen to be a doctor, and I've written only one book, and that is not on medicine. I come from the city of Kolkata, and I'm quite interested in the way you spoke this evening. I see it as a sort of a guidance for aspiring writers. My question to you is that those who are engaged in other professions and aspire to write something outside their profession, what is your advice, if I would like to put it that way?
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you on having stepped outside of your profession and having done it, because whoever publishes anything, a book which is out there to be shared with the rest of the world, is already showing a great amount of courage, because most writers are so sensitive about being judged, about being criticized, but you've done what you wanted to do. You followed a dream, which was to write a book, which I'm assuming is not about medicine.
It is not. It is not.
Yes.
Nothing to do with medicine.
Yes, so that in itself shows that there is this other side to you, which is perhaps longing for, craving, self-expression of a very different sort. What you're doing is already in a very noble profession. Maybe this is cathartic for you. Maybe you're sharing something about your life that you were longing to share, and you have the inspiration to actually go ahead and write about it and have a book published. So that's fantastic. You should just do a writer's job. What is a writer's job? I really believe the writer's job, any writer's job, yours, mine, who chooses that path, is to tell your truth. That truth may be not very palatable to someone else, but at the end of the day, it's your truth, and you have the right to your own truths. There are many truths, and your own truths can also change. Sometimes what you believed in at 20, you may look back and say, oh my God, I was quite wrong. And you have time later to reflect, and if you want to put the perspective right, you can. If you don't, that truth was valid at 20. You're not saying it's valid for the rest of your life. You evolve, you change, your interests change, what you want to share with the world changes, and I think every person, actually every single human being, has a story to tell. There's no such person as a boring person. I've never ever met a boring person, because every person's life is extremely specific and fascinating, because human beings are fascinating. There are no two human beings who are alike. So if you choose to tell your story, good luck to you and God bless, because it's fantastic. It takes discipline and it takes courage. So I would really encourage people in the audience, not necessarily writers, but we all have a book in us, and we should all at least give it a shot. Let that book live. Try it. I mean, what's the worst? Nothing. You've at least got something out there.
Thank you so much.
The lady with the mic.
Good evening. My question is slightly more specific, and it takes back, it's about the time that you were a film journalist. I want to know what your take is on the kind of movies that are being made today, and how film journalism has changed in these decades, because it's changed a lot.
Okay, I'll answer both briefly, because I think it's been a very long evening. But what Jerry mentioned earlier, and he is so right and so accurate, he used the word savage. It is a very savage place. The underbelly of show business is more terrible than anything you and I can imagine. When Helen put it so delicately, and you connected the dots, 13, fruits, car, studio. That is the path taken by almost every young actress, even till today. No one is spared, no matter what they may claim. How has journalism changed? Well, today it's no longer possible as it was in earlier times. Mainly the change is the corporatization of Bollywood. When big money has come into it, big corporates, it's the suits who run the show. It's no longer people who create dreams. The dreams are tailored. They are told what sort of a dream they should dream before they put the money to back that dream. So it's changed completely. A lot of the romance has gone out of movies. It's a bit formulaic. Some movies tank, some don't. But the passion of, say, a Raj Kapoor, since you mentioned him, was a different kind of passion. He made the films he believed in. He put his own money to back those dreams. He lost a lot of money in some of the films, made a lot of money, but the commitment was to his dream. That's not the case anymore. And then there are layers and layers of people, the suits you have to go through. You cannot access a star. Neither will the star give an unfiltered interview to any journalist. Every time you hear a star on a podcast or in a TV interview, print interviews, it's all been vetted and it's all decided and probably written by a PR team. You never hear the star's own voice or their own thoughts. If they're caught sometimes off guard, then it takes a lot of damage control, and then they have to retract all that they've said and say, oh no, it isn't the way we were represented. It's now a business. It's no longer what the movie business was. What do I think of the movies right now? What I think is happening on OTT is fantastic. The energy on OTT, the kind of chances they're giving young actors who would never hope to be in a Bollywood film if they didn't have a patron, if they didn't have what they call hearth to give them that break, if they were not Nepo kids. A lot of young actors and actresses today are given the opportunity on OTT, and a lot of seniors are coming right back and doing a fantastic, fantastic job. People who we thought, where have they gone? Because someone like a Sharmila Tagore, a great, competent, fabulous actress, is back in the game. So to see people in their 70s and 80s now being watched by a much younger generation and admired for the work that they're doing is fantastic. And so are the young, and so are some of the young filmmakers, including in Bollywood, who are making breakthrough cinema. I mean, I thought Lost Ladies, as they're calling it, Lapata Ladies, was a very worthwhile film. And I don't know what happens at the Oscars, but we really shouldn't be wasting all of us who are in the creative field for a pat on the back from the West, whether it's a Booker or an Oscar. Come on, have the confidence to be proud of your work and get applause and encouragement from your own people first. Win over your own people. Why do we need to be a patronizing back or an award from the West, and then we are validated, and then we think, oh my God, we've really made it because the West has seen our talent? No. Our people have seen our talent. Be proud that they have seen your talent, and they are your audience, they are your readers. And if the West also sees it, well, that's a bonus. And that's the way the perspective should be.
On which happy note is there someone who wants to give Ms. Day a baggie and...
Yes, it was a sheer delight. I won't just say delight, but daylight to actually listen to this conversation with Jerry Pinto. And as a gesture of our deep appreciation for our author for being here and sharing such insightful words with us, we would like to present her with a memento which will be presented by the Director of Tourism, Shri Cyril V.D. Dengdor, IAS. So, definitely, yes, it was a lovely conversation, and we did hear her journey, especially her adapting to the changing dynamics of language, which was also very insightful. What her story taught us is being true to oneself. Her story is even more powerful as it's one of a woman breaking barriers in a world often dominated by men. And her sheer determination have paved the way for other aspiring authors. So thank you so much once again. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we will see the two authors go to the signature lounge. And yes, that'll be an opportunity for everybody to get the book signed and meet her face to face. Well, it's just not going to be just Madam Shobhaa, but you'll also get the opportunity to get your book signed by Jerry Pinto as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our day one, which I hope was interesting and engaging. But that's not all. We'll also have music that will continue for the rest of the evening. The music will be brought to you by the artists of the Meghalaya Grassroots Music Project. And this is an initiative by the Department of Tourism for Aspiring Artists. Once again, thank you so much and have a lovely evening ahead.
We're here to perform for you all. It's a half an hour gig. So I hope you like it. And if you know the song, you can sing along with us. देखो देखो कैसी बातें यहाँ की है, साथ पर है साथ ना भी, क्या इतनी आसान है। देखो देखो जैसे मेरे इरादे वैसे कहाँ तेरे यहाँ थे, हाँ कितनी नादान मैं, मेरे हुस्न के अलावा कभी दिल भी मांग लूं ना, हर पल में बेफिक्र जाऊं। अब ऐसा ना करो कि दिल जुड़ ना पाए वापस, तेरी बातों से बिखर जाऊं। माना ज़माना है दीवाना, इसीलिए तूने न जाना, तेरे लिए मैं काफी हूँ। देखो देखो ये ज़माने से थक कर आते हो क्यों मासूम बनकर, तेरे लिए मैं क्या ही हूँ। मेरे आते क्यों यहाँ तेरी आँखों में हो बारिश, अब आए तो ठहर जाऊँ। और पूछो ना जरा मेरे दिल के बारे में भी, बस इतने में संभल जाऊँ। हाय एक दिन जब भी कोई, जब भी पढ़े कहानी तेरी, लगता मुझे मेरे नाम का जिक्र कहीं नहीं होगा नहीं। मैं यही मेरे ये आँखों में तो देखो, देखो ये दिल का हाल क्या, वो तुझसे होता ना बयां। मेरे ये आँखों में तो देखो, कैसा नसीब है मेरा, रंगे भी ना मुझे मिला। मेरे ये आँखों में तो देखो, तेरी अधूरी सी वफा मांगो में मांगो और लो। मेरे ये आँखों में तो देखो, देखो देखो कैसे खींचे लकीरें, चाहे भी दिल तुम्हें न जीते, मैं इस दौर में नहीं। देखो देखो कैसी बातें यहाँ की, बातें यही देखो जहाँ भी, मैं इस दौर से नहीं। Thank you. Thank you.